Hey everybody, and welcome to a live episode of the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast, the only podcast dedicated to making you a faster cyclist. And it's presented by us here at Trainer Road, as you can see behind us on the screen. You might mention if you're listening to this on the podcast, seeing is kind of difficult, but we also do a live stream with this every week. It's usually Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific, and you can join us on YouTube and Facebook on our separate channels. And you can check out, you can get a little bit more personal interaction with us. You can also join in afterward.
We get real personal.
Afterward, we take some questions, right, that people have submitted.
That's true.
So people submit them through Facebook. They submit them through YouTube. They might submit them also through the forum, which is forum.trainerroad.com. We always have a post that actually goes up with each episode. So you can jump in there and you can check out what's going on with the specific episode. Like, let's say Chad mentions a specific thing that he's been using lately. We'll probably link to that. And we actually have a producer that's updating as we talk about those things. So it's pretty cool. Like I said, this is the podcast presented by Trainer Road. We've been focusing on our whole development team. We've
Are you going to introduce us?
Oh yeah, that's true. I should do that. Yeah, our head coach Chad Timmerman.
Hi everybody.
Our CEO Nate Pearson.
Hi everybody.
Forgive me. And I'm Coach Jonathan Lee, by the way. And our whole development team, they've been working on releasing a bunch of different features. If people haven't figured out, it's interesting. We just did a survey recently, and I realized that a lot of people still don't really know that we have, a great calendar tool, great analytics tools, all the other things that bring in your outdoor rides into Trainer Road too. A ton of cool things.
Can I mention a survey I just put in the forum?
Please do.
So oftentimes in the forum, especially when we're trying to decide internally, hey, should we do it this way or this way? And it's kind of 50-50 inside. We could see it working both ways. The question that I just asked is, we're going to have our calendar. It's a feed that you can sync with external calendars like Google Calendar, iCal, Exchange. And the question was, right now in our app or in our calendar, you don't specify a specific time, just today. Would it be useful to see that in Google Calendar, Exchange, et cetera, as like an all-day event? You'll get marked as busy for the whole day, but just so you can see it, and we put in the workout notes and the description and the duration, TSS, all that stuff. Or should we not release that, wait probably a couple months because our engineers are working on something else, and wait until we have specific time. So you can say, I'm doing this at 2 p.m., and then in your calendar, it will block out that 2 p.m.
Yeah.
There's already a lot of responses. I think when we do this, anyways, if you want to see the responses, I don't want to spoil it, but you can go in there and there's a poll in there. It's one of the top posts, so you can find it. But stuff like that, if you're part of the forum, you can help us guide Trainer Road about how we do things.
Speaking of the forum, we should cover some follow-ups really quick that we actually ended up posting or talking about within the forum last week on the podcast that we did with Specialized in the Tunnel. It's a pretty sweet podcast, by the way. If you haven't listened to that one, 188, you should go check that out. Chris Yu and the crew there.
Super
Dave K. Super Dave Kaler. He did an incredible job, both of them, at delivering some really actionable stuff.
Dudes.
Yeah, they know their stuff. But we had a few different things that we wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I have two.
Yeah, and leading into one of them for you, I'm going to set the scene so you can hit it out of the park, Nate. I'm giving you a tall tee. Yeah. One of the things that we talked about, if you've watched any of Specialized videos, they always deliver the time saved by whatever aero change you're doing. And they do that usually over 40 kilometers. Mm-hmm. So the reason they do that, there are a number of different reasons, and Nate, you can kind of go into that. But we actually asked them to do something different, right?
Yeah. So if you there is a Specialized video that shows why they do time saved, and producer Bryce, if you could link that in the show notes, that'd be great. But I asked them to put all the watts in context of a 250 watt rider, like FTP. I'm not sure if Chris actually did that, but a lot of people assume that all the watt savings were for 300, 30 miles per hour.
Right.
Like this is what you would do at 30 miles per hour. But I chose 250 because based on the bell curve of our data, the average wattage, the top of the bell curve is right between 240 and 250 for a Trainer Road user. That doesn't talk about power to weight ratio, right? So you could be at all different power to weights, but that's kind of the average. So that's why we wanted to.
Even between men and women?
Women's lower, but this is I believe this is with men and women, yes. So it's kind of like the middle.
Yeah. So it was a data-driven decision, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other question, we talked about Venge versus Tarmac, and Chris said there's a pro answer and a non-pro answer. We talked about the pro answer, then we talked about drafting, and
we didn't get to the non-pro.
Yeah, but I asked him afterwards because as soon as we ended, I was like, the non-pro. So basically what he said is when you're a non-pro, you have to think about compliance and comfort too, more than the pros, because the pros are they're a different level, right?
They can, and just really quick touching on that, they can handle a bike that is not going to be as compliant, not as comfortable, but they'd be able to handle it over variable or tricky terrain more effectively than perhaps an amateur. That's why that matters. That's why for us, average Joes, we actually really want to look at that and think, you know what, I might need this. I might need this as an edge.
And it took me like maybe 2 years to figure out what compliant is, because it sounds weird, right? Compliant means how much up and down flex there is. So think of it like a really compliant car would be like a Cadillac, like real smooth.
And that's specifically vertical compliance, because
so
there's also lateral compliance as well.
So when they call about a bike that's stiff, you think about lateral compliance. So you can still put power into the pedals, it still reacts, but then when you go over bumps, it's compliant.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. And if you get tired and it's kind of jarring after 2 hours, and you're like, oh, I need to sit up more, like this is uncomfortable, then you can have the fastest aero bike in the world, but you're gonna take away those savings by sitting up. Also, I was like, well, isn't the new Venge is way more compliant than the last Venge?
Yeah.
And Chris says yes, but we keep getting the tarmac is also more compliant. So every time they get more, so it is more compliant on it.
Yeah. He talked about a limiter, which is really interesting. He basically said, like, to weigh that option for us average Joes, you want to look to see if you're watt kg constrained. Which is basically like, let's say you're like, a lot of people talk about the fact that I'm going to have a race and it has some climbing, so should I go for the tarmac, right? Do you want to explain that concept a bit?
So what he talked about was for pros being, my question was, well, wouldn't if for the whole race, if you had to put out 10 or 15 less watts, you'd be able to put more power out when it was needed? And his point, which is true, these pros are so aerobically fit that, that the 4 or 5 hours leading up to maybe their 2 minute or 3 minute or 4 or 5 minute all out period, it's not impacted. He calls it kilojoule limited. It's not really impacted by that 5 hours. It is what it is when they get to that surgy point. And for them, that's why they need a bike that is as close to the UCI weight limit as possible, because they need every advantage.
In that specific moment, that's really their whole entire race boils down to that moment. So they want to be optimized for that moment, right? And that's why you'll see Sagan, for example, in some cases he'll be riding a tarmac or something like that, because they've picked a specific point on that course where they feel like, you know what, this is going to give you more advantage at the critical moment.
And sorry, Chad.
I was just going to say it's not a sprint stage, so they know it's more important that they get him to the finish line as comfortably with as minimal energy expenditure as possible, rather than preserve his sprint power.
So that's another point. Like for Sagan, when he rides a tarmac, it's not because he's going to have this like all-out hill climb. Most likely, he's not even. If it's that kind of stage, he's not even in it.
Survival day, time cutoff day.
He's drafting the whole time, right? And they just want to make sure that for every climb, he has a little bit less energy, so that over maybe the whole tour, he's putting out less energy. But on the stages that are flat where he wants to sprint, when he's sprinting, he's always on a Venge. Always, right? So I would say two average pros, or average Joes, average people, they are more kilojoule constrained, especially in a longer race.
I'd agree.
And saving those.
Can I rephrase that in a way? Everything that you've done leading up to that critical moment matters perhaps a little bit more, because we're going to be less efficient.
We're less
impacts the end of the race.
We're less aerobically fit than pros. So that was kind of interesting, but also the not jarring. That's nice too. Being more compliant. Also, we've recommended and bigger tires.
Oh yeah.
That really helps.
I'm running 28s right now on my Venge. And I see them balloon. I'm running the Schwalbe Pro 1 tubeless. I see them ballooning a little bit over the profile of the rim, so I know I'm actually losing an aero advantage. When it comes to race day, I'm going to be cutting down. I'm probably going to be running the S-Works Turbo 26s. I love that tire. Chad and I always,
best tire.
It feels so good. So I'm probably going to switch over to that. But for anything beside those critical races, it's so nice to have a little bit extra volume on there. It just makes the bike handle so well. It's smooth. It's comfortable.
You descend better.
Yeah.
So even if you're not, it's a little bit different weight. But if you're not doing a TT or like a breakaway or a sprint, if you're in the pack and you're just, the point is going to be a climb, the extra weight is not that much. I know it's rotational weight, but you're not attacking up a hill like you are in a crit or something like that.
Especially for average riders who are probably packing a couple extra pounds of body weight anyways.
Yeah. Just because you are heavier doesn't mean you can't still get an advantage.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. The last thing I want to say, we didn't put it on the sheet, but someone in the forum was confused by this. Super Dave was talking about other ways you could optimize your bike. And one of them was latex tubes. He said, spend your money on latex tubes rather than carbon upgrades. Because latex tubes for the money can be a huge benefit. And someone responded with, well, there's these new Conti butyl tubes that are the same weight as latex. So couldn't we use those because they don't lose air?
It's not just weight, though, is it?
Well, it's not weight at all. Okay. The reason that latex is so great is because it takes less energy to deform them. Right. So that's when we have rolling resistance, is that a butyl tube takes more energy to actually deform. And you think about, like, that couldn't be much. And it's not much. That's why it's like 1 or 2 watts. But you get 2 watts in both wheels, that's 4 watts. And then you start thinking about 4 watts and you're like, on Trainer Road, like 4 watts. Sometimes I reduce it by 4 watts and I make it. And sometimes, right, 4 watts can break me.
Totally.
So when you think about it, it can also break your competition.
Right.
There's one more thing I want to mention.
Yeah, please.
This is just not everyone it was a good question because sometimes you forget that not everyone understands this stuff at the same level. And they said, well, if I have all these aero benefits, should I lower my FTP?
Right. Yeah, I saw that question. Yep.
So these are completely separate. So if you're targeting for, let's say, a half Ironman, 200 watts, and you get all these aero savings, you could actually probably target a little bit higher because you're going to be on course less time. But I wouldn't even worry about that.
That would be the only change.
Yeah, I would just stay at 200 watts.
Stay at 200. Because remember, this isn't adjusting your physical capabilities in terms of your output. What it's doing is making you more slippery through the wind. So when we talk about watts saved, we're not adding that onto your FTP. We're talking about watts in terms of drag. So
you just go faster.
Exactly. You just go faster for the same power. Can I switch gears really quick on a few things?
You can totally switch gears.
Before we jump into the questions. True, I can actually. I'm the host. One thing I want to cut into with this really quick is I looked at our ratings the other day. And I don't know if you...
Podcast ratings?
Yeah, podcast ratings on iTunes. I think that we have like 1,100 something reviews, and we have 5-star reviews, so thank you so much for doing that. But we are trailing only one cycling podcast by 100 ratings.
Whose cycling podcast is that?
Mr. Armstrong's podcast.
Lance Armstrong?
Yes. Yeah, The Move. So if you guys really appreciate this podcast, please go and leave a 5-star rating. Let's blow that rate. Let's blow that 1,200 rating out of the water.
Or if you have something against the other podcast, the other person,
there's probably a lot of ammo there.
Yeah. We will be your weapon.
No doubt. But we appreciate it.
That'd be pretty cool.
So if you want to leave a rating, it's a great time to do it. Anyways, then the final thing is on the forum, we put up a survey that was more broad in general, and we're basically making some changes on just the marketing side of things and how we're presenting things with Trainer Road. And we were asking you for your opinions and your information, or actually more your opinions, not really your information at all. Anyways, you can go on. There's a survey on there, and you can find that. If you just search survey, you can
pinned to the top.
Yep, it's pinned to the top. You'll be able to find it. But we need people that are non-Trainer Road members to answer that one. So if you are not a Trainer Road user, please go and fill that out. That would be really helpful. If you know somebody that isn't a Trainer Road user, and maybe they saw that they're familiar with Trainer Road, but they haven't signed up, that's really valuable information for us. So if you know them, please pass them over to the forum.
And if you are, it's still very useful. Totally. We just don't have enough people responding to the survey that are who know the brand that are non-Trainer Road users.
Right. That's the specific thing that we're looking for. The questions may seem somewhat vague, by the way. Some people have commented on that, and it's intentionally so. So just answer them to your best of your ability, and we appreciate it. I think that more or less covers things. Straight into the questions?
Let's do it.
All right. This one is going to be from John, and this is really an interesting topic. And I did a lot of weird, my mind twisted itself in a few pretzels trying to get around this one.
As did mine.
Yeah. He says, I'm a big fan of Trainer Road on the podcast. Everything anyone could need to go faster. 5 stars all the way. I like that. Sounds like a review someone could leave. That would be pretty good. He says, throughout the podcast and across the forum, I hear and see a lot of referencing to individual watt per kilogram. That's your power to weight ratio, or FTP per kilogram, which is, for those that don't know, when you express your power to weight ratio, in almost every case, you use your FTP as the power that you're using in that ratio. You can look at it for shorter durations, sure, but it's just more common. If you hear anybody saying it, chances are they're using that FTP.
Divided by body weight in kilograms.
Exactly, right? Whilst I completely understand that this is a big factor for hilly events, I compete in TTs which generally don't have big climbs. A quick check on Best Bike Split shows a drop in weight on these types of courses has minimal effect on the times. Assuming no major changes in aerodynamics, is it in this case safe to assume that raw power is more important than watts per kilogram? I think that we can mention that. We can cover that one right there, right?
Yep.
That's what really matters. That's why in the time trial, for example, between you and I, perhaps our CDAs were different, but you had a whole lot more power than I did.
Like a lot.
Yeah, a ton.
So much.
And since it was a pan flat time trial.
He was talking to Chad, not me.
Yeah. Since it was a pan flat time trial, then in that case, it's advantageous.
In time trialing, it is aerodynamic drag to watts ratio. If you're a little bit heavier, you'll have a little bit more rolling resistance, but that's the very, very couple percent. You're going so fast, it's just about all aerodynamic
instead of watts
drag.
per kg, it's watts per CDA.
Yep, exactly. That's what they look at. So he says, if weight was to increase and power stay the same, would the weight element in the Vo2 Max calculation have a significant effect on aerobic capabilities and race performance, even though most events are done around steady state FTP?
Can I say something before you get in here?
Yeah.
It's the Vo2 Max, the milliliters per kilogram per minute.
Yes.
That is, the kilogram is put in there to normalize it, just like watt per kg.
All
So when
stuff
I do
I'm
a
gonna cover, I got many notes on this.
Cool.
Okay.
He says,
This is our first of two. deep dives today.
He said, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So Chad, you put a lot of work into this.
I did, because I saw this as a good opportunity to address a topic that these are terms we throw around a lot, and I don't think a whole lot of people have a real strong understanding of what all this stuff means. So with that in mind, I'm going to first just quickly cover what Vo2 Max is. Just basic definition, we're talking maximal oxygen uptake. And if you remember in weeks past, we talked the difference between uptake and intake. How much air goes into lungs, how much oxygen goes into lungs doesn't necessarily mean that's the amount of oxygen that's making it to the muscle and being used for work. So it's uptake. It's what takes place at the muscle itself. This is a combination of a couple things. It's your max cardiac output, so how much heart or how much blood the heart is actually pushing through the bloodstream to the muscles, and then what's called the AV-O2 difference, which is the atrial venous or atrial venous, however you want to put it, oxygen difference. How much blood is in your atrial or your arteries, so coming from the heart. Or not blood, sorry, oxygen, and then how much oxygen comes back via the venous system. So that difference tells how much is getting picked up at the muscles. So as that difference grows, obviously more oxygen is getting picked up at the muscle, probably because you're doing more work. In order for them to calculate this, we have to measure gas exchange, and there are other ways, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But what we're looking for is a plateau in that AV difference. So oxygen uptake has stalled. Basically, it can't go any higher. And we typically see this on the last couple steps of a ramp test.
You're talking about for Vo2 Max.
Vo2
Max.
Yep. So you're working your way through a ramp test, trying to assess Vo2 Max. You hit a step, and your AV difference is what it is. Then the next step, it doesn't change. There's your plateau. That's probably a good measure of your Vo2 Max.
And this is not our ramp tests. These are just step tests at
just
exercise.
a ramp test that's aimed specifically at determining Vo2 Max via measurement of gas exchange.
Makes sense.
So again, oxygen consumption tops out, voila, Vo2 Max. Now, there is a term that gets thrown around, and I don't want to confuse the matter, but when you hear Vo2 peak, for our purposes, it's synonymous. The assumption is that some people can't reach that plateau. Certain limitations keep them from actually reaching a full-on Vo2 Max, so they just take the highest value. That Vo2 peak becomes effectively their Vo2 Max.
Got it.
Okay, so what Nate just mentioned is there's two different types of Vo2 Max measurements. There's relative and there's absolute. Relative is when we relate it to body weight, and that's typically done in milliliters per kilogram per minute. Absolute is when it's just the absolute amount of oxygen that's being uptaken. Let's go with that.
Uptaken
for a minute, and that's usually expressed in liters. So it's liters per minute.
Yep.
Okay.
That's what we're going to talk about here, because he wants to eliminate body weight from the equation. So we're just going to talk about absolute Vo2 Max.
Got it.
So and then
would this change? I guess like I've seen where like rowers say like they have like the highest.
Absolutely.
So it's not like you have like one Vo2 Max for any activity that your body does.
No, and that gets really fine too. So we can go, I mean, if you're talking about running versus swimming versus riding, consider the amount of muscle mass that's at work. So, and we call this the functional mass, or it's termed often enough functional mass. So the actual muscle that is driving whatever activity is that you're taking part in. So again, you're going to have a running Vo2 Max. You're going to have a riding Vo2 Max, a swim Vo2 Max, a rowing Vo2 Max, cross-country skiing Vo2 Max, whichever, and it's going to be higher dependent on how much muscle mass is actually being utilized. to perform whatever activity it is.
So that's why. So these cross-country skiers and rowers are really cheating because they're using more muscle mass than us.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's why you see the highest values in full body exercises, total body exercises like cross-country skiing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we get the biggest values there. So you put someone who has an astronomically high, like you take Miguel Indurain or something, put him on skis and see what sort of VO2 max numbers we get then.
Yeah.
I promise you they'll be higher than his bike only VO2 max.
We just
After
need to-
proper training.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I'm talking a world level athlete,
yeah.
but even then.
We just need to do
see
those
an
dancing
increase.
spin class things, and we'll just pick that VO2 max.
Well, okay, no, let's get to that too.
Cool.
So, and with this specificity to the activity that we're taking part in, it can be subtle too. So we're talking about the difference. I don't want to create an issue here, but we talked about how on a time trial bike, when you get down into your time trial position, it may be a limitation because now you're recruiting same muscles but in a different way, or maybe some extra muscles that you weren't recruiting when you sit upright. I mean, there are subtle changes, so this could have a subtle impact on VO2 max.
Makes sense.
Yeah, different muscles doing different jobs, working at different rates, et cetera. Okay, so. But the gist of this, or what I'm driving at, is that oxygen consumption doesn't take place unless that functional mass changes. So you have to have more muscle, but that muscle also has to be directed at the particular activity. So it doesn't just mean, you can bulk up your upper body as a cyclist and boom, you're going to have a higher VO2 max. That muscle is basically dormant when you're on the bike. There might be a slight uptick because there's more muscle mass, so there might be a little more oxygen consumption, but it's not going to have a big impact.
This is the absolute VO2 max.
The absolute, the
Yeah, not
non-weight
relative.
related.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, fat, however, is not functional mass. You're just carting around extra weight.
Shoot.
I know,
So it's not going to help
darn
you
it.
go faster. I mean,
Let-
it might help you
downhill?
go faster downhill.
Downhill?
There we are.
And in the case of, and I'm getting slightly ahead, it might work in your favor in terms of inertia.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So basically, just look at it as you're using the same amount of oxygen to produce power, but now you're carting around more weight. So this is basically a decline in economy. If you think of it in terms of automobiles, you get lower miles per gallon. So you have the same engine, but now you have a heavier chassis.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I'm going to say it a different way too. Like, I know in our tests, I think Jonathan was at 68. We were VO2 max, and mine was 62.
Yep.
But I believe my absolute VO2 max is higher than Jonathan's.
Sure it is.
When
Right.
weight's not put in.
Yeah.
And I've done this in another test to a person similar size. My absolute was much higher, but I'm a much bigger person. So maybe, and that's probably also why I have a higher FTP than you. But cycling isn't just all about FTP. When we're doing a time trial, you have world-class drag. We all know this. And then when we're climbing, you weigh so much less than me that
Right.
it really is that
That's when
that
it has a huge
relative
impact.
VO2 max, yes, where you're at the 68 really just destroys me.
So this is an interesting point too that you hear a lot of the time if you take a VO2 max test and you are out of shape. Let's say it's off-season time versus when you're in peak shape.
Yep.
In peak shape, you tend to see those higher numbers because you're more conditioned. Correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's both being conditioned and weighing less, have a better body composition.
Because when we're talking
Yeah.
just in regular conversation about VO2 max, it's usually not this absolute value; it's the relative one. So
Almost
we're
always.
taking that into account. That
And it's only
weight.
ever about performance anyway. So
Yeah.
whether it's absolute or relative, it's really about how fast you go.
I feel
How
when
well
we
you
did
finish.
it, we were all not very fit, and we were all not have the best body composition. Sorry,
Totally.
guys.
Which is the only
Yeah.
reason
We all
I wanna-
agree.
only reason I want to do it again.
I know, so I want to do it when we're like really fit,
Yeah.
and then schedule a point real fast and do it. I think you can break 70. I think I
sure.
can break 65.
Yeah, I back calculated when I had a 380 FTP and was doing really well, time trialing really well. I probably was in the ballpark of low 70s.
Yeah.
So I mean, the numbers,
That makes sense
the
because you
numbers are
were
there.
almost fifth at nationals by a
Yeah.
2/10 of a second or something.
True, but I was fast.
So that's, you have to be in the 70s, I think, or really, really smart, or have really good. You're all those things.
Yeah.
Good looks.
On the side of on the side of performance, that like you said, like the main goal is that it aids performance.
Yeah. So in the case of who are we talking to here, John? In case of John's question, it's additional weight probably isn't a big concern as long as it's a steady state effort and it's a reasonably flat course. So a couple things working for you. One of them is inertia. I mean, once you get the weight up to speed, it doesn't take as much energy to keep it at speed. So, and again, we're removing wind and CDA and a lot of other factors from the equation. So just this is strictly looking at how weight affects VO2 max.
Normally, too, a couple pounds increase doesn't increase your frontal area, like your drag.
True.
It's
Right.
really the height that does it to people, because then the angle it's like an angle that goes out this many inches versus more inches, you're going to be higher up in the air and you have a bigger
You can
front
hide
layer.
that beer belly just fine.
Yeah,
Just tuck it in there.
Yeah.
Wind's not going to see it.
it. That's a good technique.
Okay, so it's raw power trumps watts per kilogram in cases like this. It's really about the work you're doing, or the watts, or the kilojoules, which kilojoules are just watt seconds, and how much of that transfers to forward motion, which is just mechanical power or efficiency, all of which just boils down to speed.
Yep.
How fast can you go? 30 miles an hour does not care what you weigh at Saddley. Flat course, once you get it up to speed, if you can keep it there, 5 extra pounds is not going to make a difference.
Yep.
And so it's the getting up to speed part that takes into account.
Exactly.
But what's interesting is at the tour, they always start with, I'm going to use air quotes, potential energy, because they start on a ramp.
Yep.
So even these bigger people,
Yeah.
they get to start and they get the benefit of going
those guys,
downhill,
yeah,
right?
true.
Yeah.
like
it's super short, but it does make a difference.
it evens. I think it even lessens their disadvantage. Their slight disadvantage of having to accelerate mass. They're on a ramp and they get the they get to get up to speed faster.
Before we go any further, one thing that I want to add in is I think of this very thing whenever I'm not in a time trial, but in a group event, whether it's a group ride or a criterium or a road race. Yeah. When I'm in a flat section and people are going up the road, I try so hard to latch onto somebody's wheel, because me having being a smaller person, having a lower FTP in general, I have less raw watts than the majority of people I race against.
Yeah, it's going to exact a heftier toll.
Attack the small people on the flats.
Yeah.
For real. Yeah.
And the crosswinds. Crosswinds are best.
Yeah,
That's why this is important.
Period. Yeah.
Yep. So that's why, like, whenever I'm in this scenario, I think of the reality of my situation, and I try to leverage the strengths of other people around me. And when you can do that, it's something. And then when I'm on a climb, I look to flip the tables, right?
Sure.
And in that situation, I'm like, okay, now I can use that lower weight as an advantage, so I'm going to try
because
to animate
that's when your relative Vo2 Max really matters, or your relative power actually matters when we're considering accelerations, reaccelerations, climbing, obviously.
I want to just mention this topic. I know we're breaking this up, but it's good.
Sure. Yeah.
Some people don't understand why crosswinds are a good place to attack on the flats. I'm just going to say it right now. So if there's no crosswind, and let's say I'm attacking, Jonathan there's a big wake behind me, right? And it's directly behind me with no wind, because I am punching this hole through the wind. And we learned about this last episode. So, I mean, all cyclists know this, but we got a better scientific answer.
Yeah.
So Jonathan has to get, just a few, and probably even yards to start getting a benefit. But then when he gets on my wheel, he has this huge benefit. And I think they even showed sprinters that being like half the power, right, that they need to do. But if there's a crosswind, especially a big crosswind, Jonathan, that draft behind me, it's actually getting pushed, right? And if I can also line up on the edge where he can't be staggered against me, then he doesn't get that draft. Right. And this is where you see the echelons that happen in the tour, where one person will be on one edge and then they're all kind of 5 over, and then it will be strung out against the side of the road.
They get guttered.
Yep. And then you see gaps, right? Because the smaller cyclists, they're not getting a draft.
Yes.
And now it's really my raw watts or my raw VO2 versus Jonathan's raw. And
it's a really employable tactic. If you can take a big, strong rider and force the smaller, less raw watt riders into the gutter, it's a huge advantage.
When there's a crosswind.
In the case of a crosswind,
You see in the Pro Tour races, you see teams like, Dimension Data, for example, and they have their sprinter like Cav, who is going to be a smaller guy, right? So he's not going to have his, the raw wattage that even somebody like his main lead out man would have, right? So he won't have that, and as a result, they really try to take care of them in those situations. It's interesting. I saw like a cycling memes account say something that was like basically inferring that like a sign of a rookie cyclist is somebody that thinks it's a good idea to attack in a headwind. And I sent him a message. I'm like, I think you got it backwards. Like, it's really like one of the most effective times to attack,
especially on lower category racing.
Yeah.
Because when there's not a team, if there's a team to chase you down, it cannot be as good.
Right.
But if you're in a lower category and there's no team, you're attacking the headwind, and everyone looks for the other person.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, can you bridge up? Because that's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you just watch that gap grow, because nobody wants to do that work.
Yep.
Exactly.
And then when they start doing it, like, I'm so tired, someone else come through, and everyone goes, I don't want to come through, you do the work.
Yeah.
But if it's a team and there's like 2 people who can sacrifice themselves, it can be pulled back pretty quick.
Yeah, and especially if you're a bigger rider, then you really want to be the one that's attacking into those headwinds and that sort of thing, right?
I've won a race that way.
So I can think of multiple races where that was the deciding factor, and I can think of many attacks that ended up sticking, and it was because I attacked in the most unideal circumstances for the mind, but it ends up being actually pretty ideal.
Yeah.
You know?
Other people don't attack in a tailwind.
Yeah.
That doesn't help.
It's like attacking at the base of a descent.
Yeah, exactly.
You're done descending, you're fresh, you're feeling good, so you attack. Everyone else is feeling fresh.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Not the best timing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so there are a couple other matters that, since we're on this topic and we've covered this stuff before, but I haven't really gotten a chance to dive just a little more deeply into each of them. So we covered that Vo2 Max is where oxygen uptake plateaus, the final steps of a ramp test. You can also calculate this or estimate it pretty closely with just your 5-minute best effort. I mean, you can go out and do an all-out 5-minute effort, but as with any efforts, any mean maximal efforts, it's hard to get it right. So you might have to do it several times, and that's not an enticing proposition to pretty much anybody. I don't know who likes doing that.
I swear, I feel like
track pursuiter.
5 minutes is like harder to pace than 20 minutes.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah, for sure.
5 minutes is a really hard duration to pace.
True.
Because you're so tempted to go higher than you should.
You start higher than you should.
But if you've done a lot of races where there are some really good 5-minute powers in there, where you've had to really get on it for 5-6 minutes at a time, go and cherry pick that data, and it has to be recent, of course, and that'll give you a pretty good idea of where your power at Vo2 Max falls. Which brings me to what power at Vo2 Max actually is. So again, we speak simply in terms of power. What's our functional threshold power? When our lactate levels are topped out and they're not, outpacing our ability to clear lactate, there's our functional threshold. What's that power? Functional threshold power. Same with Vo2 Max. When our oxygen uptake is at its peak, when we're at our 5-6 minute mean maximal output, that's our power, roughly, pretty close, at Vo2 Max. Now, what's helpful about knowing these two things is you can compare the two and see perhaps where you need to dedicate your energy, where you need to work. And this is, of course, going to depend on what type of racing you do, but there's a term, it's fractional utilization, which is basically the fraction of your Vo2 Max that your FTP falls. So if your Vo2 Max power is 300 and you're capable of riding at 200, that's 66% fractional utilization, which sucks, by the way. It needs to be pushed much higher than that.
Right.
90% seems to be the ceiling, and there are very few athletes, and there are high-level athletes who can hold 90% of their Vo2 Max power in a steady state.
We don't know this for sure, but I've heard people think that Chris Froome's like this.
It makes good sense. Of the people who are likely to be like be that way, he is probably exactly it.
Yeah.
For most of us, it falls in the range of 78 to 85%. Now, this is useful. That 85% number, you can look at that and say, for instance, you do a 300 watt 5-minute effort. 85% of that would put you at a functional threshold of about 255 FTP. But what if you're someone who has a 230 FTP, yet you can do that 5-minute 300 watt effort? That tells you there's a lot of room to grow your FTP. This is when you start shifting your focus towards FTP growth and improvement in muscle endurance, sweet spot efforts, threshold efforts, over-unders, which we're going to expand on in a bit in a different question. But what if you're at 280? And you can barely bang out a 300 watt effort for 5 minutes. That tells you probably need to focus on Vo2 Max work. Maybe you're not doing it. Maybe you are doing Vo2 Max work, but you're not doing it hard enough. So up it. Or just increase the time at Vo2 Max. And that's a topic we're actually going to touch on a little bit later. So there's a difference between power at Vo2 Max and time at Vo2 Max. Conversation for another time.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and this is like, you can see, if you're listening to this, you can see how complex it would get if you're trying to like train things and move your energy systems. And that's why a properly structured plan is really the important thing, because you're training these energy systems.
These are all the things that I try to make happen when I develop those plans and roll them out to y'all. So they may not be tailored to each person specifically, but they're pretty close.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to answer your question, John, you could eat your French fries, and it's not going to affect your time trialing.
You can. Course.
There's other parts of French fries do to you, but as far as weight, it's not going to affect you on a flat course.
Totally, yeah, and that's also why you see time trial bikes not caring about weight, right?
Yeah, they care a little bit, but they don't care to the same extent. They'd rather have aerodynamics than weight.
Totally. Yep. And you'd rather have a stiff bike that's not going to be flexing underneath you and everything else. So all those things are going to be better. Kate's question. She says, hello, gentlemen. A few podcasts back, Jonathan mentioned that he asked his wife if she would ever compete in cycling, and she replied that it was not friendly. I feel like a lot of people can probably, remember at first when I picked up mountain biking, and then a friend of mine told me that I should try a road race, and I was like, never. Like, it's so elite and cutthroat and not nice, At least that was my assumption. My perspective's changed.
My theories are all just so scared it's hard to be nice.
Yeah, that's a real. I bet that's actually like really close to the truth.
There's a lot of fear.
There's a lot of nice people. I think there's just a few. At least I've never raced a women's race, but there's a few alphas
Totally.
that they shout higher than everyone else, and they kind of brand everybody.
Yeah.
That's true that you get the same people off the bike and they're
nice.
the nicest folks.
I know, but on the bike, there's like in a race, all it takes is like 2 alphas on the bike at a 50-person race who yelling at everyone. Everyone goes,
it really changes the whole vibe.
Yeah. So don't be that person.
Yeah, I think fear. That's a really good point,
shut
Chad.
up
I think
and do
fear
your
is at
work.
the root of it too. When people get nervous, they change their behavior.
Oh yeah,
And
they have less. If you're scared and you think someone's doing something that will endanger you, you're no longer nice.
it's fight or flight.
Yeah,
Hackles are up and you're ready to fight.
Yeah, you either hit the brakes or you yell at them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So she says, later in a podcast, you guys were discussing gravel races as a friendlier starter scene. I'm a year into cycling and looking to try pinning a number on my back, but I don't know what scene is best. Are gravel races more beginner racer friendly than road races? What about in terms of races with bigger women's fields? What scene is best for starters? One quick thing on this that I want to share, like just really big kudos to the Colorado Classic. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it was the Tour of Colorado or whatever it was called, USA Pro Challenge. But they actually completely dropped the men's race this year and made it just a women's race.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Which is awesome because we have, on the other side of things, like everybody dropping more and more women's races, it seems like, from these big pro tour events. So that's really cool. We're going to be speaking a little bit out of our element in terms of what's best in terms of women's racing specifically, but we'll speak in generalities in terms of our experience in different racing formats and what we found, and perhaps from observations.
I think I've actually coached more women riders than male riders.
Oh, cool.
So.
Yeah. And then the one thing that I want to add is that there's a plug there's a brand called Machines for Freedom, and they make kit and apparel and that sort of stuff. But really, they also they're big advocates for women's cycling. And if you stay in tune with that brand, you'll be brought up to speed on what events are really, really good for women, because
cool.
I follow them and
What's the
I get
brand
a ton
again?
of value from that. Machines for Freedom.
Machines for Freedom. Cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I get a lot of value out of that because I see where the trends are going, like, these people are actually focusing on building things specifically for women's racing, that sort of stuff.
So we talked about this. Chad, you haven't heard this yet. So maybe we should go through and then you can agree with us or disagree with us and why.
Sure.
And Jonathan and I disagree a little bit down
We do.
the rain. So first one, I think we both said triathlon.
It feels like the least...
Full agreement.
Yeah.
It is
seems
so
like the most-
friendly.
It's a welcoming
The
environment.
vibe is so friendly. You can do a road bike. If you're at the bigger events, they're closed courses.
Yeah.
Smaller events, they're not. It doesn't matter what speed you go. You can get dropped. You can go your own pace. You can stop on the side of the road for a little bit and talk to somebody.
I want to share an experience that will illustrate this. I've never seen this happen in a road race, but in transition at a local triathlon, I saw a girl struggling with getting her bike all set up and pulled out of the rack and everything else. So competitors, just like in triathlon, they stop and they help her out, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but in road racing, you're never going to see somebody.
People will see that and be like, right on.
Yeah, exactly. Like they see a person with their number pinned in a way that's billowy and they're like, awesome, he's going to lose 5 watts on me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's very different.
My wife, she's never changed a tire because I've changed them all for her. And she was doing triathlon and I said, okay, we'll put the pack on here. If you get a flat, someone nice will stop and help you.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. You can try to figure it out. She didn't want to practice, but it's even pros. Lance Armstrong said he's never changed a flat before. And Chrissy Wellington famously on Ironman, she got a flat. She had never changed a flat tire before. An Ironman world champs.
Yeah.
And
Right.
a competitor actually gave her a CO2.
Which
and
is crazy because that's at the pro level.
And
at
she
World
lost. I know
Championships.
other women in that field were pretty mad about that because Chrissy lost 5 minutes there. She came back and won by like 15. Yeah. So if she didn't have the CO2, she wouldn't have won, and someone else would have been Ironman champ.
We'll get to mountain biking in a bit, but Chloe Woodruff actually did the same thing this year at Austrails, the Epic Rides race. They were coming down to the finish, and she was with Aaron Huck, and they both got flats, and it was swapped wheels. One had a flat front, one had a flat rear, and she actually ended up giving her rear wheel to the other ones, and then Aaron Huck could finish. So it's pretty rare, but it's really cool to see.
So for triathlon too, you don't even have to wear the gear. You could wear like baggies. If you're not a runner or swimmer, what you do is you do a relay with some friends. You find a swimmer and a runner, and you can get that feeling of being in a race and other people around you, but you're not that close because you can't draft. You should be doing other rides outside with other people anyways, but it's the ultimate beginners. Totally. It's very accepting. Everyone's nice.
Yeah. Thereafter, I feel like, and there's two kind of things, right? There's the vibe surrounding the racing, and then there's the technicality or complexity of the racing, right?
Yeah, they're both important.
And they're both really important. I feel like time trials is one where there's actually not a whole lot of technicality. There's a lot of equipment stuff, but you don't need a TT bike. You can just ride whatever bike you have. But it's not a lot of technicality. And on top of that, in most cases, since it's a 1x1 starting event, I find that at time trials, it's a little bit more of a relaxed vibe, when you're waiting for the race.
Personally, I would have pushed this farther down the list. Is this list in order?
Yep.
Of friendliness? Yeah, I would have pushed that down below gravel and probably even cyclocross, maybe even mountain biking, simply because it's still kind of an intimidating atmosphere. People show up with funny bikes. I mean, just crazy high dollar bikes. They're all geared out. Everyone's very serious. Well, not everybody, but 99 out of 100 riders are very serious. It doesn't strike me as I wouldn't steer some first-time racer to a 40K TT.
No, I'm the opposite, is that I think of myself included, my sister, my wife, people who I get into the sport, they don't have handling skills. And when they get to those mixed surface ones, it is terrifying. Like, they'd much rather see a funny bike than think that they're going to break their collarbone and stuff.
I just don't think TT's that enjoyable either. It's just not a fun undertaking.
Yeah. But for you, Nate, you love TTs.
Yeah, my wife, she likes that because she doesn't have to ride in a pack. She wants to do uphill TTs because that would be her kind of strength. Yeah.
And you like the analytical side of it, and I guess that
there's no tactics. It's just power too, which is fun. It's how deep you can go. So if you're brand new, I'm not saying you have to do this forever, but it's a good way to get your toes more into the water.
No, there's a lot to be gained from it. I admit that. It's just not one of the friendlier scenes relative to those others.
On the friendly side of things, I think gravel, you mentioned it, but like
gravel's super friendly.
Very inclusive, super friendly.
It's like the triathlon of
non-triathlon.
Yeah, of non-triathlon.
Yeah, exactly. It's super comfortable in terms of, you even see you'll show up and you'll reg, but when you register, like, people are relaxed and happy and having fun. It's not like the kind of nerves that you feel at a normal road race. In many cases, the feed zones are like really fun with gravel races too.
Yeah, they say races, but a lot of these gravel things, they're not.
Totally.
Like the top people are racing, but you can stop for literally 20 minutes at a aid station.
Oh, yeah.
Stop for an hour if you want to.
Yeah, it's very much a ride, for everybody doing it. And I feel like gravel, for those that want to understand the psychology of gravel a bit, I feel like what it is it's a direct and an opposite response to road racing in a lot of ways, in the sense that people are, people that want to break from that intensity and that cutthroat nature and just being stuck onto the road. It's like kind of the opposite of all of that. So you get a lot of people.
A playful version of road racing.
Yeah. I think they're really friendly. Honestly, probably the most fun I had last year in a race was the Sagan Fondo, the Big Fondo.
That's great too.
So the only thing that's the downside of this is the mixed surface. Totally. My sister just got a cross bike. She was doing gravel racing, or just riding on like fire roads. She hit a turn and just bam, wiped out because she doesn't know how to turn. Where on the road it would have been perfect, but it's completely different. And especially some of these races, you get really fast downhills. Yeah. If you're not,
the courses are quite technical. I mean,
exactly.
Really challenging. So if you have the option, if you're going to pick a particular bike to venture into the world of bike racing, get a mountain bike and do gravel races.
Yeah, it really does help
not
a lot.
Cross bike.
Yeah.
And if you're, it depends. So I totally agree. And if it's a more technical one, I still ride mountain bikes on like Sagan Fondo, but if it was something like Belgian waffle, where it's not technical and it's just really you're not even turning, you're just going straight. Right. Then you could do. They do road bikes on that with road tires.
Yeah, good riders do. Yeah. And I guess going from there, you bring up something interesting that, like, for new riders, they don't have the proper technique. So since they weren't on the road and they were on gravel, in the case of your sister, that she fell, and really it was probably technique and understanding how to ride the bike in that scenario. Yep. And that's what I find cyclocross, the next one. Like, cyclocross is so good for building those skills because it's usually low speed, lower consequence in the terms that you're on grass a lot of the time.
Yep.
So you fall over and it's not too bad. The pedals are easier to get in and out of. The shoes are easier to walk in. That's another thing for gravel, instead of
and a big selling point, it's a closed course.
Yep. There's no cars are going to hit you. There's not really, maybe at the beginning there's pack riding, but you can just wait a couple seconds.
Probably not going to have a bear or a deer jump out on a trail ride. No, that's a real.
I had a bear come out. Yeah.
Did I tell you guys about? I went over the bars this year because I saw 3 bears.
So you just saw them.
It's a nightmare.
Going down a scary section of trail that's extremely steep, 3 bears run across the trail, and I panic and lose focus and I crash. That's the worst time to crash, is when there are bears right in front of you. Yeah. But it's a definite.
So the idea.
The thing about cross, though, that's really cool here is the fact that cross has, it's not. I wouldn't say it's quite as relaxed as gravel, but cross definitely has a party atmosphere to it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one where you can build the skills in a low consequence environment and kind of strike a balance with having an environment that's not quite as intense. So this is like one of the spots where I feel like growth potential is really high.
Yeah, the front end of the race, the pointy end, is highly intense.
Yep.
But the rest of it, I mean, there are people taking beer hand-ups, dollar hand-ups.
Same with triathlon,
bacon.
even. I mean, the front end is highly intense.
Yep.
The reason why I like this order for developing a rider is because before they get into a road race, they're going to be really good at handling a road bike. If you can handle a road bike and cross on the road, it's easy. Everything seems like
it's a great
easier.
Place to learn handling.
Getting on and off the bike, unclipping and clipping in. Like when you're on the road, and it happens to everybody, you clip in the first time. One of the first times you flop over.
Will happen. Still happens.
But you do it 100 times in cross, like during a race and with warm up. If you fall on grass, right?
Yeah.
You can pick grass courses, but you get so much better at it.
It carries to trail riding really nicely too.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm always impressed, still to this day, even having raced cross loosely for a couple of years, when I see a mountain biker come off the bike for whatever reason, do a cross remount in a mountain bike race.
Yeah.
It's just impressive. It shows they're a well-rounded rider probably, but it's just a cool thing to see.
And it's a good skill to have.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is.
On the mountain, so I would say, in my perspective, mountain biking comes next. But I don't think cross. So there are two main disciplines of mountain biking. There's cross country Olympic. You could probably lump short track into that in this case at least. And then there's cross country marathon. So those are like all the epic rides races. Those are all the longer, more endurance focused stuff. We're talking 3 hours or longer usually is what people have. I feel like those, especially epic rides events, those events are fun. Like there's nerves and everything else when you're at the starting line, but it's not a serious road race vibe.
So that's the vibe is fun, but the technicality is so much harder, I think, than the last two road and crit. It's such a high skill level. I think with the last epic rides, I crashed like 6-7 times. I still have scars on my body from that.
And that's just mountain biking, like in general.
But
it's
you
more
have the
complex.
option to get off the bike and walk something that's scary. You can't get off the bike and walk a technical course, a technical section of a criterium course.
That's a good point.
I'd argue though, if you've gone through our little progression and you've done cross, you're really going to be fine.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The thing about mountain biking that I feel like is more appealing to people is in many cases, in the majority of cases, there's no pack riding element and it's lower speed.
It's lower absolute injury level too, because you don't. Mountain biking, the worst is like a collarbone, and that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
When you crash, it hurts, but it doesn't put you out for
in
a
road.
long time.
If you don't break a collarbone when you crash, it's a miracle.
It's like everyone's like, yes, good job.
Yeah.
And then the road rash is much, much worse.
Oh, much worse
in road riding.
I feel like there are more organizations doing more to make mountain biking more inviting than there are road organizations trying to make road more inviting. And that, I think, helps with the vibe a lot. Cross country Olympic is where things get a little bit more serious. You can totally do it. And the nice part about cross country Olympic is the fact that it's on a short course. And if you're in a lower category, they aren't going to have anything really dangerous on those courses. So the nice part about that
depends on the
relatively
race.
speaking,
depends on the race organizer.
That's very true.
We know some that it's like they don't care. They're like I remember one in Reno. They put a downhill section in the cross country. That's where I think of like new riders. I couldn't walk down the section.
Not pointing downhill, but we mean like the classification of racing downhill.
Yeah,
so
something where I could not walk down
like an enduro stretch.
No, it was downhill. It's called downhill.
Yeah,
like you know what I'm talking about, right?
It's pretty.
I cannot walk down it.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
I'm not interested.
So it depends on the race.
Totally. What you usually find, with cross-country Olympic races, is that it's a short loop and you repeat it 4 times, 6 times, maybe even 8 times, right? That's getting closer to short track. But you can repeat a loop. So the nice part about that is that it can be something controlled in a small area so you don't feel like you're getting super far away. And then also the other benefit of this is the fact that you can session something and you session it by nature. So you basically can get more familiar with these things on the course. There's less mystery about what's coming up. There's less fear.
Yeah. Same goes for cross racing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cross is a much better example of that, I think. Yeah.
And
then I would put road racing after that. And then I would put criteriums. I would put criteriums last in some respects because I feel like road racing is less physically confrontational in the sense that, like in criterium racing, I feel like there tends to be a lot more what is the late Paul Sherman would always say, argy-bargy, in the sense that, like, there was a lot of actual contact happening. I see less of that in a road race, But I can see how a road race would be more intimidating because many times they're longer or any other thing.
I'd say too that I guess I've done some mixed categories, and in general the women are much more friendly than the men.
I've noticed this,
right?
Yeah.
So
Far less posturing.
The progression we just gave you is like, wow, I'm not going to do a crit for many, many years.
Right.
Jump right in.
If this is what I recommend, you get a cross bike with disc brakes that you can switch from cross tires to road tires.
Yep.
And then you do locally you find the group that helps you ride in a pack. You do cross, but then for the crit and roads, you do the crits early, but you do the lower categories in smaller fields. Sometimes, especially for women fields, there might be 5, 8 women in it.
Yeah.
In lower category, everyone's there to learn and have fun. That's a great way to get in early.
Yeah.
I wouldn't jump into the maybe a Sea Otter where there's a 50-person field right away.
Yeah, especially considering with women's road racing, and I know they're changing it, I believe this year, is basically women's 1, 2, 3. You all race together. So it doesn't matter if you're a 3 or a pro, you all race together. And now they're breaking that into 2 different categories, so the racing will be a little more segregated, such that you don't have to race with the high-level racers on your first go at it.
But if you're brand new too and you're not the best fitness, sometimes a flat crit can be much easier to hang and have fun. And if it's a smaller group than a road race. So you don't have to go through the whole thing, but if you were to build an athlete from scratch, this would be a pretty good pretty good progression.
I feel like we've done all of these events now. Well, I haven't done triathlon, but we've done.
Neither of you guys.
I know.
We're missing one, guys.
Chad's
I've done relays and I've done duathlons, but I have
that
not
does
done
not count.
No, I know.
What Ironman do you guys want to do?
Oh gosh, stop with that talk right now. That would be so rough. I'm going to jump right into Chris's question to get away from that. He says, I have lots of questions, but let me ask just 2. I'm a 54-year-old recreational rider in Livermore, California, looking to get stronger and gain fitness. I've dropped 30 pounds over the summer, and my fitness for Tour de Tahoe was outstanding. But I want more, hence I've joined Trainer Road. So this guy is more or less local, which is kind of cool.
Awesome.
We have people all over the world listening to this, so it's kind of cool to get a local one every once in a while. So he has a number of questions, and I feel like this actually kind of dovetails off the previous question pretty well. This is more or less how you would train for one of those events is what we'll more or less be talking about. He says, what do you do when you miss a day of your training plans? For example, it looks like my plan is 3 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off. So for example, if I missed my Monday workout, do I have to move that to a Tuesday and move all subsequent workouts by one day, or do I just skip it entirely?
It's a good question.
Yeah, and especially now that we have calendar.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Totally, yeah.
So the key emphasis is on your most important workouts. So when you have to ditch something, try to make it one of the lower intensity rides. And get your 2 quality days in during the week and 1 or 2 quality days in on the weekend. However, you have to shift things around. Sometimes it's not optimal. Sometimes you have to stack 2 hard workouts back to back on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday sort of scenario. It happens. I wouldn't get in the habit of doing it regularly, but it does happen. If at all possible, just shift everything forward like you've suggested and still get the recovery days in between them. At some point, things are going to bunch up in an unfavorable fashion. That's just how it's going to be. That may not be your best week. It could actually be something that shines a light on the fact that you can deal with more stress occasionally if you can follow it up with more adequate recovery. Maybe you're not being challenged enough with the current volume of the training plan. You could actually stumble onto some insights.
So that our plans go, I think they're probably talking about mid-volume. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tuesday's pretty hard. Wednesday's aerobic easy. Thursday's hard, but not as hard as Tuesday. And what I found is that for me, with my recovery rate on all my personal and psychological issues, Wednesday, if I go hard Wednesday, Thursday, that's like a key way for me to get burned out. I've done this enough where for me, back to back. So it's hard. So for that, if I miss Tuesday, might I drop Thursday because that's the less key session, have the hard on Tuesday, do the aerobic on Thursday, come back strong on the weekend.
In a mid-volume plan, that's probably the best way to go. Yeah. Unless you know, or trying to find out whether or not you can take those back-to-back days. And there's some cases they do line up really nicely. They're different enough in nature that the one workout doesn't make the follow-up workout so difficult.
Especially in the specialty and build. Yeah.
Yep.
But there's riders, so I just want to say I'm a special snowflake. But there are riders here that do do back-to-back every week.
Yeah.
Yep.
They go Vo2 Max on Monday and then Threshold or Sweet Spot on Tuesday, and they can handle that all year long.
Yeah, yeah. It all depends on the rider. And this is made so much easier now with the calendar feature when you're using Trainerobe, because when you add a plan to your calendar, you can shift. It'll tell you which days are going to be easier, which days are going to be harder. And so you can move those. So before you even add the plan on, you'll shift that easy day to, let's say, your Thursday, or you'll shift that hard day to your Thursday, whatever it is. So then it actually fills out your calendar like that. And then if you do have a situation where you miss one of the workouts, it's really easy. You can just, shift that workout, click and drag it over to the next day if you want to make it up and you had an off day. Or you can change the order around, or you can skip them. I've been getting way too much practice with that, with still being sick, with having to shift things around. But it's super... It's now so easy to do that, which is a really cool thing.
And if you haven't yet tried to stack 2 hard workouts back to back, at least give it a go one time.
Yeah.
Just see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. His second question, he talks about a specific event that we'll clarify in a bit, but he says, if my goal is the Death Ride in July, what training plan would you recommend? So Death Ride, for those that don't know, that's a local ride that happens here in the Sierra in our region, and I think it's about 15,000 feet of climbing and
Tour of the California Alps.
Yeah, Tour of the California Alps, and it's about 120 miles. So it's a really hard ride. It's a big day.
It's 5 big climbs.
Yeah,
It's a big day.
It's a big day. But it's not unlike many Grand Fondos. I know that this one has more climbing, but in terms of what actually is going to be exacted on your body and just consistent effort, because these climbs are big, long, consistent climbs. So as a result, you're basically just putting out steady state power. And it's not like you're going to be putting out more power. Sure, you're kind of forced to put out, more power. You can't go easy on the climbs necessarily. But it's actually not unlike what a lot of Grand Fondos are, if it's even a flat one.
Yeah, exactly. And for that very reason, we'd recommend what we recommend for a Grand Fondo or a Century, which is a Century plan. So sweet spot base 1 and 2, and then a sustained power build into a Century plan. You can go 40K TT if maybe you've done the Century plan and you feel like you've gotten all you're going to get out of that right now, or you just want something different. Then 40K TT would be a good option. But I would steer just about anybody to the Century trajectory.
I'd agree.
I think I was the 6th finisher at that race one year, or the 3rd finisher at that race. And when you look back at the effort level, it was just, it was consistent.
It's sweet spot.
Yep, it was consistent.
It's sweet spot, descend, sweet spot, descend.
Yep, yeah. And I got passed by a ton of people in the first few climbs. So when you're doing it, just know you'll get passed by a ton of people. But if you just stay within yourself, you'll be better off at the end. He asks, will running help my fitness on the bike? Another super common question that we got. We've answered this before, but it's worth noting again. Will it help?
I mean, it can build, depending on your conditioning, your level of conditioning coming into it, it could build your aerobic engine and put you in a better place in terms of your endurance on the bike. If you're already a reasonably fit athlete, it's probably just going to detract from the quality that you could obtain by focusing solely on bike workouts. So it kind of depends on your incoming level of fitness. And then, it depends on how much you want to vary your workouts. If you're interested in keeping things a bit mixed, and just accept it. You're not going to be the best runner. You're not going to be the best rider, but you're going to have a good time becoming moderately good at both.
I feel like it'd be beneficial if I could just be a part-time runner where my joints could take it. And when I travel, just for weight loss and aerobic fitness. So if you're gone for a week and you're not going to the gym bike, you're not going to bring a bike.
So convenient.
You just wake up in the morning, you do 3 30-minute runs.
It's easy.
It's better than nothing,
it's
right?
The best, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's such a good patch.
Yeah.
Such a good fix, yeah.
So in that case, it could be help your cycling training because you can't physically cycle.
Yeah, if the alternative is doing nothing, then absolutely run.
Yeah.
Go work on that aerobic motor.
And one argument for this is the fact that many times you'll see cyclists that are like super just very focused on training, and they find themselves in that situation where they don't have a bike. So then they start running all at once and they go a little too hard. It's really easy to injure yourself. So
they have an engine.
Yeah, exactly.
But not the joint, like the joints aren't used to it.
They're not used to impact.
Yeah.
Eccentric contractions, all that. I don't know.
So this is a good argument if in that case you anticipate finding yourself in that situation. If you do start building up some sort, at least run enough so that your body is somewhat familiar with it.
Ease into it. I basically do it every time I get back into running. Carry good fitness into it and then injure myself on the run. So this time I carried low fitness into it and it's made me go slow and easy.
Yeah. That's a clever way to do it.
Clever, Chad.
I like it. Very intentional. Very intentional.
The clever
Chad.
way was to drink extra IPAs.
It's all planned out.
I'm right on track.
Yeah, that's it. The last question that he has is, where do I find crit information? I'd love to go watch a local race. I know there's one in Livermore, as I've seen them riding a loop where I frequently ride. So the best way to do it is to look up, chances are you have some sort of local sanctioning body for bike racing, and that may or may not be in partnership with USA Cycling. So if you can find out who they are, in Livermore, I know that they have a whole series of races, the Red Kite races that end up going through that region. A lot of criteriums that end up happening there. There's the Patterson Pass Road Race. I think.
Yeah, and I think the some early bird criteriums happen there or close to there.
Yes, there's that's basically the Bay Area. It's within the Bay Area, so there's a lot of racing in that region. If you're listening to this and you're from a very different region, the best way to do it is absolutely find that local sanctioning body. And the best way to do that usually is go to a bike shop and ask, and then they'll know where.
Or you can just go to usacycling.org and look at their race finder, event finder.
That's US though.
Yeah, and that's if you
I'm sorry. Were you talking non-US?
Yeah, sure. And that's also, I mean, if their organizing body is partnered up with USA Cycling, which is less and less common these days.
Or go into a forum and just go, hey, what are some Bay Area races? I did that, and I got like 30 of them.
Yeah, and chances are you're going to find people on that forum from a region that's close to you or at least familiar with it. Yep. So Jack's question, he says, I recently rode a race and was exhausted right from the start. I pushed through to do quite well in the race, even though it was totally unenjoyable the whole time. And he says,
Sounds like racing.
yeah, exactly.
Every race.
He says, I could have performed a lot better if I had been fresh for the race. At least that's what he says that he thinks that he would have. He mentions that he couldn't get his heart rate up at all.
Ding, ding, ding.
So he asks, is there any benefit in riding suboptimal races while being completely fatigued?
Potentially. I mean, it's like we just talked about with stacking hard workouts back to back. I mean, it's overreaching is a necessity. It's what makes us, what spurs the whole adaptive process, given adequate recovery. But doing it too far and too often can absolutely be counterproductive. So if you find yourself in that situation here and there, no big deal. However, if it happens often, we're starting to differentiate between functional and non-functional overreaching. Which of those is productive and which of them is harmful? The fact that you've recognized it early on is half the battle. So you're onto it. You know, something's up. I don't usually feel this way. I usually race better than this. Can't get my heart rate up. So good. The other half is tougher. It's determining your course of action afterwards. So many people, Nate was a good demonstration of this last year. We've all done it. You have good fitness. It starts to tank a little bit. Last thing you want to do is ease up. Most people address that with the more training band.
Double down, Chad.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I'm going good, and now my fitness is starting to fall off. I must not be working myself as hard as I need to, so I'm going to work harder.
I do it. You're going good. What if I did more?
Yeah, exactly.
It's it.
Yeah. You got to find that limit, though.
Minimum effective dose.
If you never do that, like you said before, like the back-to-back, if you never over push it, you'll never know where your limit is.
That's absolutely true.
Yep. And then your limit increases as year over year.
That's true too. But typically, you learn a lesson one time, and then you apply that every time. Yeah. But that's not how most people do it. They have to learn that lesson
That's
annually.
Ideally, not typically.
Seasonally.
Yeah. Weekly.
Yeah.
The weekend.
Yeah. So I've found myself in this situation plenty of times, and I feel like I get zero fitness benefit. But what I do end up getting, at least personally, I felt like I get no fitness benefit, but what I do get is a lesson learned.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a takeaway if you're, reachable, if you'll let yourself acknowledge it.
And that's like, honestly, for me, when I look at that on racing and racing nous and how it's accrued, it's through those sort of experiences. And there's your your actual potential for fitness or for performance during the race. Yeah. But then there's also how you manage that in terms of the decision making and everything else
that follows. Well, and see, if something like this happens and you have, you're working with power and you have a training history that you can go look at what led you to this point. And especially if you're recording subjective data too, maybe there are stressors off the bike that are impacting your performance on the bike. But if this happens, sometimes it actually times out well. Some people actually plan these things and try to schedule it such that it times out well. But you find yourself in this position, know that if you're carrying a big training load into this and it's led to this decrement in performance and you feeling poor and your heart rate, not being able to elevate heart rate, things of that nature, take a peek a couple 3 weeks ahead and know that if you rest now, if you ease up and take a little time, a little additional recovery, you'll come back in a couple 3 weeks loaded for bear.
Jack, too, I would look at power, too, because you said you did well in the race. And heart rate is a fickle thing.
Yeah.
That sometimes you're in a ride and you're like, my heart rate's not high enough. But you're like, but this is easy. And my power output is better than ever before. Yeah. And you might go, my heart rate isn't up, so it was just a bad.
Do not base it solely on heart rate, but he mentioned it felt totally unenjoyable. So he's not in this. It's not one of those chainless days where it's like, my heart rate's not even up and I'm flying.
Well, even
it's not what he's describing.
To that point, I've had days where I feel absolutely terrible, but I end up racing very well and I end up having good numbers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get a power PR.
Yeah, so there's like 3 different things. There's perception, there's heart rate, and there's power, and all 3 of them are not necessarily coupled together.
Well,
They
this
can
is
all
all this is an argument for never basing it on a single experience. You have
Right.
a bad day, it doesn't mean your training has derailed or that your performance is on the downslide.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the good point behind it. Theo's question. This is a good one, and I've actually wondered this very same thing. He says, I've noticed that Trainer Road over-under, and I'm saying that in quotes, sessions like McCady, Palisades, those are workouts that have over-unders. Can you define what an over-under is really quick? I guess, Chad, before we go any
basically
further?
holding really close to FTP, and you're either slightly below it or slightly above it, and you just vacillate between those 2 points over the course of however long the interval is.
People don't like
I can describe it better. It's called torture.
Hugely uncomfortable. They make you stronger. They make you tougher for sure.
They
We're
absolutely
going
do.
to get to that.
He says that I've noticed that Trainer Road's over-under sessions are really structured as under-overs, so that a set will start with an under interval and end with an over interval.
Correct.
He says other training I've done had them switched with the over interval first followed by the under. He says, is there a training difference? And he mentions, by the way, I much prefer the under-over setup because my reward for finishing the last over is truly a recovery valley, not yet another punishing under. And that's common for a lot of people with over-unders. Like I find that the over many times is easier. The under is like the hard part.
Yeah, it's because you just went over.
Yep. So you're trying to shuttle that lactate that's
This-
accumulated.
Think about how much in cycling where there is a hard effort and then everyone backs off, and that is where you get dropped, the top of a hill.
Yep.
Such an employable, beneficial tactic. I mean, if you can do this, you're gonna win some races, or at least open some gaps and make some people suffer.
Yeah. So Chad, dig in.
Okay, so this is another opportunity to delve into something that we touch on, or I've touched on a number of times without ever really talking too deeply on the matter. The objective of over-unders is to improve what's termed lactate buffering and lactate shuttling, which, don't get so caught up in the terminology, just see it more as dealing with lactate. How well does your body process this accumulation? So quick bioenergetics lesson. If we talk about anaerobic glycolysis, so anytime we process,
It's quick.
Yeah.
it will be quick. Anytime we process sugar or glucose, whether it comes from, whether we eat it, whether it comes from the liver, where it's right there on the muscle, we break glycogen down into glucose. Glucose is processed anaerobically every time. You can't process it aerobically. So glucose goes through its anaerobic glycolysis chain. One of the byproducts or one of the outputs is pyruvate. This is what we push into the mitochondria. This is what fuels aerobic metabolism. If this pyruvate, if we're working harder, and this pyruvate starts to accumulate, the accumulation reaches a point where it's converted to lactate. When we don't have the mitochondrial capability of dealing with this pyruvate, the lactate is what results, and the lactate builds up, eventually builds up to a point where it spills into the bloodstream. Now we have a measurable increase in blood lactate. So muscle lactate is really what we'd like to measure, but it's pretty hard to measure what's going on in the muscle. It's much easier to measure what's going on in the blood. It's also much easier to measure what's going on in the air, and then of course how we feel.
Sounds painful measuring that in the muscle.
So this increase in blood level lactates actually correlates with a lowering of blood and muscle pH. Our blood and our muscles get more acidic. It's not the lactate causing it, but when lactate goes up, so does the acidity. So we can actually use this as a surrogate for changes in muscle pH. We can actually see our muscles are getting more acidic, and of course we feel it too. It's troublesome on a lot of levels. Muscle system is just one of them. So what we're looking to do is improve our lactate processing and basically forestall this lowering of our blood and muscle pH. We want to make that acidity, we want to postpone it as long as possible. We want to do as more work as possible before that acidity becomes limiting. So we do this a number of ways. One is improving our aerobic capabilities, because again, that output, that pyruvate, if we can process more pyruvate, it doesn't accumulate, it doesn't become lactate, lactate doesn't build up, and we don't get acidic. So the greater our aerobic capabilities are, the more mitochondria we have, the bigger those mitochondria are, the more aerobic enzymes, PDH in particular, the more Krebs cycles, the more electron transport chains, all these things that help us do more work aerobically. This is favorable, and we are aerobic athletes, all of us, regardless.
Can I throw some context around that really quick? So, I mean, really what we're talking about is after that hard effort, that time in between, we just talked about over-unders, that's really where we're talking about those unders. In many cases, you're relying on that. That's really aerobically I should say,
I
important.
mean, it was the
at that
aerobic
point.
system that's clearing it off. It's
Yeah.
the aerobic system that's processing the excess.
Yep. And
So
when you
that-
talk about the repeatability and that being like so key for like cyclocross or criteriums or cross country or anything else.
Yeah,
like
you
that.
have to learn to work through that.
Yep.
And that's a point I'm going to finish with because I think it's the most crucial,
Right.
regardless of what's going on physiologically. So as the blood acidity creeps up, we have a number of ways to deal with it. One of them is bicarbonate phosphate buffering. So, the bicarbonate buffer system, you hear about that a lot. We aerobically metabolize substrate or carbohydrate, whatever, fat. It produces CO2. The body, the bloodstream, hydrates that CO2 and makes this bicarbonate, carries it to the lungs, and it's dehydrated back to CO2 and breathed out.
Got it.
And that's a very effective system. Alternatively, when that lactate starts to accumulate in the cells, we can shuttle the lactate in a couple of ways. We can shuttle it back into the bloodstream, goes to the liver, it's reconverted to glucose, goes back out to the body, it's used where it's needed. It can also be pushed to the heart because the heart can actually use lactate as fuel. And it can also be shuttled to other muscles, nearby fibers. It can be pushed over to those fibers that aren't overwhelmed, and they can use it to further the work being performed. And it's these transport proteins, these monocarboxylate transport proteins, these MCTs, that training at this really close to threshold, over, under, over, flooding the system, clearing the system, flooding the system, clearing the system, that actually spurs an increase in these MCTs. Really useful for taking excess lactate and pushing it to other fibers so that we can continue to work at a high level.
Yep.
There you go. So all we're looking for is to increase the time that the body spends right here without incurring high levels of blood acidity. We want our muscles to get used to this and to be able to adapt such that we can keep on doing more and more work.
And all these adaptations come by doing that very thing, right?
Exactly.
By spending more time doing that.
So really that's all we're looking for. Flood the system, clear the system, flood the system, clear the system, let the adaptations take place when we recover after hard workouts like these.
Yeah.
But the other thing that never gets brought up because we're only looking at the physiology is the psychological aspect of it. And over-unders are hard. They beat you up and they make you tough. You learn to do this. You learn to get to that point of, I can't take this any longer. I need a break. And then it dips you down into one of those recovery valleys, which just teases you with recovery. It doesn't give it to you right away. It takes, maybe it's a 3-minute valley. It'll take all of that 3-minute valley to put you in a place where you feel like, okay, maybe I can exceed threshold again and load my muscles up again for 2 more minutes. I hope I can make it.
Yeah.
And this is the point of that's the clearing. So that's why after I do the over section during the under, the RP is actually increasing. My heart rate's actually going up.
Doesn't feel any easier.
And
They're so awful.
This is that psychological part where when you're maybe newer to these efforts and stuff, you're like, I need to give up.
Yeah.
When really, if you just wait a little bit more, it's going to get a lot easier relatively.
The inspiration for putting text behind these workouts is the easiest because I've done enough of them and I know how miserable they are, that if you can coax people through those valleys and tell them, don't take a back pedal, you don't need it, you just want it. Just keep on going. It will clear. And once you convince people of that, it's really affirming. I mean, people, it's quite a confidence boost to recognize, I don't have to stop. I can continue to work.
That's a really good point.
You can think of like a 1 minute over section is really a 90-second interval because it's like before you get back.
Oh, totally.
And the same thing with climbs. The climb does not end at when it starts to level off.
It
It's
does
another
if you want to
30
watch the race right away from you.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time.
Yeah, totally.
right? Yeah. So many times it's happened to me because you mentally you think the finish line is the top of that climb and
the top,
everyone's
there's
just going
the
to start
top.
chilling.
Yep.
And then someone doesn't chill and you're
No,
like,
they don't chill. Yeah, the biggest thing that I've noticed with higher category racing too is just the fact that your unders are much higher. Your unders, meaning that like the off time is
Barely
not
dip under.
off.
It's like an over-under.
Yep, exactly.
Where
right.
lower category racing, it's like everyone just turns off.
It's like one by it's just like
racing
your
is just a series of over-unders. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Exceed threshold by as much as you can for as long as you can, and then when you dip back down below threshold, only dip below it enough to be able to do what you just did.
Cyclocross, crits,
Every
road.
form of racing, except for steady state effort.
Yes, because they try.
I did a poor job of
do that.
explaining the point I was. Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, that would've been
Maybe
good.
subtly, but infrequently.
I did a poor job of explaining the point that I was trying to get out earlier, and I think I have a better way to explain it. A lot of the time, you'll see an athlete that just attacks, and you'll even hear like in pro race commentary that they'll explain their capabilities as he just has such great anaerobic capabilities, right? But the interesting thing, and hopefully one of the things that you've gleaned from what Chad's just ran through here is that when you're doing that sort of effort, when you're going over your threshold, then you're under, there's a huge amount of that required from your aerobic capabilities as well.
Yeah.
And it's not like you can just be a very anaerobically, oriented athlete and you have those capabilities and that's it. you have to be the sort of athlete that, your aerobic fitness contributes a ton to your ability to be able to repeat and recover those efforts. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting point that I feel like a lot of folks don't fully understand with that sort of thing. So I guess going back to the main question, is there really any difference between an under-over or an over-under?
Not really. Not simply because we're doing... Even in the case where I break it down to like a 3-minute, because there are some workouts like I think Gould, and there are some workouts where you simply do a single over effort and then you have to ride out an under effort and then you get into a recovery value. Yeah. There's still plenty of benefit in that. It's just one way of reshaping a similar goal workout, a similar goal to the same type of workout.
Yep.
So no, it's not like one gets marginally more beneficial than the other. Over the course of a 10 or 12-minute round of over-unders, you're doing plenty of riding off that excess. Yes. Just because the last one pushes you up to a height and then gives you a recovery valley doesn't detract from the quality of that workout. It's just not going to make that big of an impact. Yep. If you feel it does, it's not hard to restructure a workout so that you finish on an under and you have to ride it out before you hit that recovery valley. But honestly, it's not going to change the TSS much. It's not going to change the stimulus. It's not going to change the adaptive process that follows. It's just not going to be that big of an impact.
Even the psychological benefits, I feel like you get that in the meat of that set of intervals. You know what I mean?
I start you off with short intervals. So if it's going to affect any of them, it's going to affect those. But those are the ones where you're easing into this anyways. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't give it much thought.
This next question from Marshall is representative of a lot of questions that we're getting from a lot of folks right now because race registration's opening up. I know, for example, on January 1st, all the Epic Rides races are opening, although 24 Hours in the Old Pueblo is also obviously already open. Leadville's going on right now. There's a bunch of them. I think Haute Route, their series, I saw that they started pushing them. So it's the time to register for these races and to put them and definitely get in while you can. This question's from Marshall. He says, in hindsight, meaning that Nate, you raced Leadville. He says, what are the best training?
I completed
plans?
Leadville.
You did it, no, you did. You did great. You got a good time.
I think that qualifies as racing.
Yeah,
tell me more, guys.
Should we continue? Yeah. He says, what are the best training plan options for Leadville? I've done the race twice, and I'm thinking actually that the climbing road race specialty block is the best fit. Do you have any thoughts on that? So, Nate, what say you, looking back at it?
Nope, you're burying the lead, Jonathan. We should have put this at the beginning of the podcast. We'll answer this question in a bit.
Okay. What should we say? Should I just say it?
John, one of us is doing Leadville this year.
Yeah,
it starts with John, ends in Anathan.
I'm doing Leadville.
What?
I know, and I said that I was never going to do it. Well, not never. I said I was going to eventually do it, but I did not want to do it in the next couple years. You're going to do it this year.
Ooh, yeah. And it comes right after Nationals, right?
Someone
3
roped
weeks?
him into it.
Yeah, I got roped into it. It's I think, it's 2 weeks after Nationals.
So, Chad, doing Leadville 2 weeks after Nationals?
I can't imagine better timing, honestly. He's not training specifically for Leadville, but he's going to carry a hugely high level of fitness into Nationals, rest for a week, sharpen a bit, and go do something that's... I won't say it's going to be a fun day, but you could just view it as a fun race. You're not taking it too seriously. You didn't even train for it.
There are thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people wanting to know what you're going to do at Leadville. So
it's
maybe even 100,000.
I feel like I have to check it off. Like it's part of the thing of being a mountain biker. Like you have to check that box.
You triathlete has to do, well, doesn't have to do, but you do an Ironman, a runner does a marathon.
Totally.
A mountain biker does Leadville.
Yeah. And I feel like it's not, for me personally, it's not the ideal mountain bike race. I like technical, difficult mountain bike races, right? But I feel like it's a good time to do it because it's after my goal event and all I've built up for things. I'm going to check it off. But I'm not going to do any specific preparation for Leadville at all. Yep. So I don't think that that's the ideal way to prepare for Leadville.
Obviously.
Right? So I don't want people getting confused with that. The reason is because I have an A race, and that's my main goal. That's 2 weeks before.
You know what these are? The excuses are so early.
Oh, gosh.
Hey, just so you know, I would go faster. I'm just not training for this one because it's just not a big deal.
I didn't intend for it to come out.
I know, but I'm just joking with you.
But
setting the stage.
But yeah, the reason is because that sort of training takes a lot of specificity and focus, right? And it does not jive at all with what I'm doing for a 90-minute, very hard race.
The difference is this kind of goes well into the question about training plans is sweet spot climbs versus punch over-unders, which you're going to be doing for your 90-minute XCO.
Yeah.
If you were to specialize for nationals versus Leadville, they'd be very different specialty plans.
Yep.
Very different specialty approaches.
Yeah, I think the Century plan is honestly a great plan for Leadville.
Well, before we get into that, there's
Yeah.
another question. I'm going to
Okay.
just make it all about me.
Okay,
I can get into because I did a sub 9 last year, so I'm automatically in if I pay the $400.
Yeah.
I kind of want to do
Still
it
haven't decided.
because I want to. Yeah, I want to do a better time.
Yeah,
I want to
yeah.
go at least sub 8:30.
Yeah.
I think I could go sub 8:30, and if I'm fit, I could go faster.
Maybe sub 8.
Maybe sub 8. That's, if I solve my health issues,
Putting carrots in front
I
of him
could
right now.
go
Yeah,
that.
seriously. I mean, if you could train for more than 3 weeks at a time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sky's the limit, man.
But I talked to my wife about it, and she goes, "What are you, expletive crazy?" Like, it was a week of me like lying in bed afterwards, and like a week of foggy brain, and like 2 more weeks of not training because it was
Lost motivation.
Well,
That's how it
ju-
works.
it
you
was
just got to get a bit of distance on it before you recommit.
I
Do
was
it again.
destroyed.
I think a lot of it was, the condition that he rolled into. That sort of thing
Yeah.
has a lasting effect.
I do when you totally bonk hard.
Oh, yeah.
it's hard.
I've actually never.
Well put.
Yeah.
I've never read
Wisdom here.
I've never read a study on this.
You should
I've-
quote me, put it on the
it's a
wall.
soundbite.
Yeah, when things are when you bonk, it's hard.
When you bonk hard, it's hard.
It's hard.
Nate Pearson.
I've never seen studies on this. I don't know if you guys have. So once again, this is me just throwing something out. But I have seen like the long-term effects from something like that, like dehydration, pretty severe dehydration, and overheating and that sort of stuff. They can last for quite some time. So it's not like you just get hydrated and then sleep overnight and then you're just fine the next day.
No.
No, you
It takes some time.
It's a
beat
long
yourself up real good. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So
And we're thinking about too is going up
yeah.
race morning.
Race day.
So trying to stay at
We
sleep
have-
at 5,000 was close to where we're at. Mm-hmm. Get our bibs, come back down, and then race morning, drive up.
Because from experience, you spent that first day there. You said you felt pretty good.
I was
right?
there for like 14 hours before I cycled, and I was good.
Fine.
Felt
Yeah,
great.
my power numbers were good.
Yeah.
Like 5 days in, it was another story.
And
It
the
was bad, or
research
3 days
supports
in.
that too.
Yeah.
Go day of, or see if you can spend 10, 12, 14 days there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're thinking that, and we have to go up to Leadville the day before because you have to pick up a packet. But the plan is to go up there and then drive back. And actually, right at the mouth of the canyon, right there in Golden, that's where Yeti HQ is, and they have a hotel that they partner with, and I think I get good
Oh, wow.
rates there.
And that's about 5,000 feet.
5,000 feet, and I
Yeah.
get good rates there. So I think we'll probably end up staying there,
That'd be good.
and then I'll just kind of get up in the morning and have somebody drive me, and I'll
Also,
sleep as much as I can. in
I
the
think I'm
car.
going to go. No, so I was thinking about this because Leadville, you do need to have, in my mind, a full breakfast before you do Leadville.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens, you guys saw me do this, you wake up so far ahead of the race
Mm-hmm.
that if you were to eat in the car, it's the same. You get up the same exact time
Mm-hmm.
because the drive isn't that long. So if you get up 3.5 hours before the race and start eating,
Yeah.
you're doing that next to the race line, or you're doing that with a 2-hour drive.
I would just want to get more sleep beforehand.
You don't. It's what I on
And
these
that
big
sleep is
races.
throwaway anyways.
Yeah, you wake up
that's a
at
good point.
you wake
I
up
never
at
sleep
10,
well.
12, 2, 2:30, 3,
Yeah.
3:45, and then you're like the alarms are for 4, and
that
I'm just
sort of
getting up.
stuff doesn't have a measurable impact, not an impact anyone needs to concern himself or stuff with on events like that. I mean, if
Right.
you're going to go do a match sprint or something of that nature, it might actually impact it. But
Yeah.
for long endurance events like that, nothing.
Christy Wellington, who's won, was 3 or 5, I forget. She's one of the greatest female triathletes of all time. She says
Yeah.
she doesn't sleep before these big events, like at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Lots of pros for doing Ironman long events say they barely get any sleep at all because they're so nervous. And
Yeah, it's hard to.
Yeah.
If you are sleeping, and as far as that being recuperative, that's a totally separate manner, or beneficial in that respect. So,
Day before, don't even worry about it.
can we talk about a few tips on Leadville, really, since this is Marshall's probably going to be doing it. He's done it a couple times before, but the one thing that I feel like we recognized was it's going to be very beneficial to have a person at an aid station, or at least at a point to be able to help you on the way back, because the last point that we helped you was, I can't remember the name of the aid station, but
Pipeline.
it was the Pipeline. Exactly. That was the last one we helped you at. And then after that it was see at the finish, but a lot happens in between there and the finish.
Is aid allowed to be on course after pipeline?
I don't know.
I think that there is a spot where they can provide aid.
I've seen people give people bottles.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. So
Sure.
I don't know. I'll have to look at it. I know that you can't get there via car. So I would think that you might have to park at a point and then ride in.
Can you ride on course, or are you going to have to
I don't know.
Yeah, that's
We'll have to
It's
figure all
tricky,
those
man.
things
it's
out.
tricky. Yeah. Okay.
It's tricky, but I feel like that's one thing. If we could, I feel like that would have helped you a lot because we could have given you a fresh Camelback, some cold drinks, and everything else. That would have helped a lot. So I'm thinking that's like I learned a lot, at least being on the aid.
We
side
will
of things.
figure it out, and we will, with what we know now, we will push the strategy to the limit of the rules.
Yes.
And I think this is what Super Dave said last week.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we will do our best job. So I don't know. Is it? I kind of want to do it too on like a hardtail mountain bike with drop bars.
Yeah,
Frankenbike.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my Frankenbike.
because we saw people with drop bars doing it this year. Chad and I saw like 4 folks, or maybe.
At least 4. Yeah.
I could save weight though and have a good aerodynamic advantage too of having drop
Totally.
bars, especially on those flats. Just having your arms in, and I could be a little bit lower and then go in the drop sometimes.
There's a lot of options for positioning on drop bars too. A lot
Yeah.
of places you can put your hands, which
Yeah.
over long rides like that makes a big deal.
Yeah.
On a mountain bike, all I'll have is those togs, right? And
Yep.
like those afford
If you have
you
those.
some different position, but it's really not that different. So yeah, it really gets pretty.
So in the forum, I don't know if you want to see me kill myself, tell me, or if you love me, like my wife does,
Maybe I should.
say don't do it.
I'll start a forum thread and say, everybody give me advice for Leadville. That'll be a fun forum because they'll basically like
Cool.
anybody that's done it before, they can chime in. Then
Yeah.
you can also chime in there and tell Nate.
You
to
can
do
put a poll
it or
up.
not. Yeah, I'll put one up there.
And I should do another poll about what people think you'll do, just to put pressure on you.
Okay, sounds like a great idea.
No finish.
That's how it works.
Which, by the way, the way
As
that
soon
I'm
as you
doing
announce it
this-
on this podcast, you're locked into
Yeah.
just ridicule and motivation and
works.
all sorts of.
strange stimulus.
Mm.
After nationals, I'm doing Downeyville the next weekend. That's here close, and it's been on my list for a long time, and I want to do that.
Don't
one,
hurt
so-
yourself.
It's okay. I won't. It says me now. I'm knocking on wood.
Cut that out.
But no, I don't
hubris
ever
of
plan
man.
to. I know that, but yeah, I think I'll be okay. I think I make good decisions with racing, and as long as I'm not 5 days into a gnarly stage race, I'll probably be okay. But then after that, then I'll be going into Leadville. So it's it's going to be totally unique.
Marshall's
plan?
question.
Let's do
Yes.
it.
Which training plan? Ideal training plan. Question is climbing road. That's what he thought. In my opinion, Century.
Yeah.
Ideal. I did do climbing road at the very end. That is just because I had been doing 8 months of sweet spot work, and I wanted a little bit of VO2 pep before I got in. So if that's another way to do it, but I had been doing so much sweet spot for my entire season that I didn't want to. I wanted to switch it up. Kind of we talked about. I was closer to my VO2 max, like my VO2 ceiling. So I wanted to then raise that. Like my threshold was, you know what I mean, as a percentage of
And
VO2.
sometimes you just get stale. I mean, you can only do so much sweet spot work before you just need a new stimulus.
It's just fun.
both physiologically and psychologically.
I haven't done over-unders in a while, and based on this conversation today, I'm going to say I'm going to do over-unders tonight.
it,
Because it sounds fun.
Yeah.
Doesn't always have to be exactly scientifically perfect.
Yeah.
If it's fun, is fun.
Sustained power build, for sure. I feel like is the best build plan too, because you spend a lot of time with steady pressure on those pedals at that race.
It's
so.
just a long day. It's not going to be an explosive effort after explosive.
There's no
Yeah.
explosive efforts.
There are none, right?
None.
Yeah, there shouldn't be.
There shouldn't be.
Not even
Yeah.
mildly explosive. I mean, might be getting up over a short pitch real quick, but that's
There's not even that. There's
Really?
the power line climb. I mean, that's not explosive though. That's just like hanging on for dear
It's
life.
just hard.
You'll ride it, Jonathan, but by the time I got there too, enough people are walking that you
don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice. And I was so tired I could not ride it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, it'd be complex. Last question. This is from Chris. He says, "Hey guys, love the podcast. I started listening over the summer and I'm currently working my way backwards through time, which is equal parts confusing and interesting." He says, "So much good info. I'm currently recovering from minor arthroscopic knee surgery and I'll be starting Sweet Spot Base 1 in mid-December. My question," so he's probably just starting right now. He says, "My question is regarding amateur training camps. For the past 8 years, my teammates and I, usually 8 to 14 riders, take a week-long trip in mid-March to escape the snowy mud season wasteland that is March in New England and head to sunny Southern California." He says, "At that point in the season, we are generally coming off 2 to 3 months of solid indoor training, generally of the sweet spot style with some longer endurance rides sprinkled in as weather and conditions allow. Probably averaging somewhere between 400 to 600 TSS
let's
per
say
week."
500.
Yeah, somewhere around there. It says, "Once in SoCal, though, it's not uncommon for us to hit 1,000 to 1,200 TSS in 6 to 7 days of riding, with 250 or to up to 350 or maybe sometimes even over of that," he says, "in a single ride." He said that's not too uncommon for them to have. And then he says sometimes we'll even back those long days up in an adjacent manner, so it's one after the next. We know it's not probably the best overall plan, but it's so hard not to do massive rides in the mountains when you're on vacation in the sun with your riding buddies and away from spouses, kids, and life for a week. It's also worth noting that try as we may, we simply cannot avoid trying to rip each other's legs off on some of these climbs. Discipline is so hard to come by. So this sounds like every other training camp. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, sure. That's how they work. So he says, just how risky or detrimental is this week in the grand scheme of training? In my case, I'll be doing mid-volume sweet spot base 1 and 2, short power build, and your Criterium specialty plan, targeting a week-long crit series the last week of June. The California week will line up right at the end of Sweet Spot Base 2, and I'm wondering if I should do anything before or anything different, either right before or right after this camp, like including an easy week before and after. He says, obviously, I'm planning a recovery week after the camp at minimum. Should I run through the rest of the questions, then we just address it all at once? Probably better to do that. He says, any suggestions for how to structure the week? Will a midweek recovery day be beneficial, or should I just push through the week and recover after? He mentions that he's expecting to be completely shattered after the first 3 to 4 days. So if that's the case, will the last half of the week have a positive training benefit, or will I just be piling up fatigue and risking illness?
Cool. So let's go back to, he's wondering if I should do anything, different either right before or right after the trip.
Yeah.
The Sweet Spot Base 2 ends with a recovery week. Mm-hmm. So there's your recovery week. I don't know that
perfect,
I would do anything. I think the timing's awesome. I think you're folding it in just perfectly.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's the answer to that
what
question.
About
in
the
general,
TSS increase? Let's talk about that.
But before we get to that, in general, for people who want to do this, is you just want to come into these. If you're going to increase your TSS to your 100%, come in fresh. I mean, it sounds silly, but come in fresh.
Yep.
To the same point of what happens after 3 to 4 days of being fatigued. Mm-hmm. If you come into it fatigued already, you're basically starting the camp in a fatigued state, and you will absolutely miss the point.
Yep.
Yeah, and the benefit.
Yeah. It's not. You see a lot of. I even see higher level teams. A lot of the athletes, they taper coming into those weeks.
Why not?
Very
it's
intentionally.
Going to be. It's almost like a mini tour of some sort. I mean, in this case, how many days are we talking here?
It could be 6 to 7.
Yeah, it's a tour. It's Tour California. It's a lot of mileage.
What about TSS increase? So if he's normally averaging 500, and he's looking at doing somewhere around 1,200.
Yeah, typically the recommendation is not to do more than double it, and that's the high side of things.
That's stretching.
Mm-hmm. So it's like anything else. I mean, suck it and see. Maybe you can get away with it. Maybe you can't. I didn't. I well overdid it, and I paid the price. It demotivated me for months. But then I go to smaller camps where it lights the fire.
Yep.
So you've done enough. It sounds like you've done it before. Who are we talking to? Chris?
Yeah.
Sounds like you've done it before, Chris. So you've got some experience to base this on. If it worked then, I don't know why it wouldn't work now. My single concern, speaking from the perspective of a coach, is that after the first 3 to 4 days, if you are shattered, there probably isn't much to be gained over the remainder of it if you're just going to grind yourself down. Mm-hmm. That's going to have a lasting impact on everything that comes after it. Maybe it takes you a week to rebound. Maybe it takes you 2 weeks to rebound. But over the course of that time, over the course of this healing process, you will lose some of that fitness.
Or you get sick.
Yeah, exactly. And then, and then it really hampers your performance and your subsequent training and your motivation and all those things. So my advice would be 3 to 4 days, you're completely shattered, skip 1 day, then get back in for those last couple of days. You can rally quite a bit over the course of, what will amount to about 36 hours of recovery instead of 12.
Yep. Yeah, it can happen pretty quickly. Nate, we've gone to Cliff Camp together, to the H24 camp. You've been to Audi Camp. Yeah. We've done a number of different ones.
We're going to Cliff this year?
We're going to Cliff this year.
Yep. Are you coming to Cliff this year?
Thinking about it, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. It'd be fun to have you.
Oh.
Yeah. Because that'd be the first time at Cliff Camp, right?
Yes, it would be.
Yeah. That's a fun group to ride with. Something that along those lines that I've noticed with a lot of these camps. So, H24 camp, for example, they usually end up starting with a short ride that has some sort of time trial. And then in this case, there's actually a team director that's looking to rank people, right? So he's looking to use that time trial for ranking. But they basically
for early season races.
Exactly right. And he basically pairs intensity inversely with duration for these sort of rides, right? Except for at the end of the camp. At the end of the camp, it's just no holds barred, and it's like a really hard day, right? At the end of it.
Yeah, I'm glad I skipped that.
Yeah, exactly. So if you are planning this camp out, the way that I would do it is I would plan something like, if your first day, keep it, maybe you can rack up a decent amount of time on the bike, but try to keep things as gentle as possible. And then, if the next day, pick like, if you're going to be down in Southern California, go do something like do GMR all the way up to Baldy, right? Or sorry, just do GMR, not going all the way up to Baldy, and do like a time trial effort, something like that.
This furthers the case for bringing a high level of fitness and freshness into this. I mean, actually train for this. As you're working through Sweet Spot Base, see that as a springboard for this training camp, because you're going to need good fitness to not bury yourself in the first day or two.
Yep.
This sounds like obvious advice, but don't be the slowest.
Yeah.
I've been at a training camp. I've been the slowest, or maybe tied for the fastest.
Yeah.
Completely different experience. When age 24, I was the slowest person there.
Yeah.
Everyone's these lightweight bantam climbers
so
that just
fast.
Yeah.
Everyone on that team is so fast.
What did somebody do? Like 440
and something
for like climb for 20 minutes? Like what? And it was lighter than me.
Yeah. Weighed like
I did
160
360 and I was
155.
like, yay!
Yeah, exactly.
And he's lighter and did 80 more watts than me.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So that really helps actually. If you're not the slowest and you're not the least fit, it makes everything easier.
Oh, it totally does. Like you said, Chad.
Being the weakest rider.
Good thing that he has Sweet
Is that
Spot
right,
Base.
Chad?
I've been there.
Have you
In
experienced
fact, Herbalife, that camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like having the Sweet Spot
Never.
Base coming in, chances are you've got a decent amount of fitness coming in that it's not going to, just at least the finishing the rides probably isn't going to bury you for sure. But back to my point is, try to schedule things so that your final days are the hard ones, rather than letting yourself get, overzealous on the first few days and doing a little too much.
The other thing
really bad
that I think is really important and can be hard too, because you're out of your regular environment, is eating. And I think you need to eating and chat and drinking. But I've said this before, but I think I perform much better if during those camps I've got a bunch of fruits and vegetables that I can eat in between, and then I eat like high carb stuff. I on these things you're riding so much. There's no weight gain.
Right.
It just helps you ride and feel better the next day. And there's some things you think are carb-centric, but they actually have a lot of fat. Like tortilla chips, I always see those at camps.
Yeah.
But they have a ton of fat in them.
Oh,
You
yeah.
do that with avocado, you're getting the percentage is really high.
Yeah.
So maybe do your vegetables dipping in avocado, and then eat some fruit, and then eat something,
Probably not the best time to hit the fat real hard.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not really, because chances are that intensity is going to be pretty high on a lot of stuff.
The other thing, Chad's probably can talk about this a lot, but the beer and drinking at these camps can also...
Don't do it. Seriously, don't. I mean, if you're going to ride with your buddies and stay up late and shoot the shit, feel free.
We got to bleep that
Go
one.
crazy.
Yeah.
Shoot the poop. Go on.
Yeah, sure, that works.
That's one thing, but that's not. I don't think that's what most people are after when they go to a training camp.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like that was what you guys are after either. So, I've seen both sides of that, and I've also seen what the riders, how they race, early season, mid-season, late season, and there's a direct impact. I mean, there's a particular psychology or mentality that goes with indulging like that and then going expecting to be high-performance athletes.
I've been to training camps before where they actually call it a drinking camp, but then they just ride a lot.
They're my favorite kind, but I don't go to them to bring out a whole bunch of fitness.
I would say, too,
It's a different objective.
This is like don't be the slowest, is don't be the one person who drinks a ton,
Yeah.
because then it's going to be hard. But if everyone has a
And
couple
you'll garner
beers...
no sympathy either.
Yeah, you have a couple
yeah.
beers, too. Actually, the Cliff is more of a...
Yeah.
They drink.
They strike a good balance, I think.
We stopped in the middle of a ride, and I don't know how many bottles of wine they went through, but I was like, there was a 40-minute climb afterwards that people were going to go hard up, and I didn't have any alcohol, and I could keep up and beat people. That's probably why I beat Pete.
Yeah.
Is that I wasn't drinking.
Right.
So one person threw up on the climb.
I was going to say there had to be some vomiting.
No, I think he threw up. Jazz threw up, I think, twice or once. But in general, I mean, with your buddies, it is a vacation, couple drinks, but I just don't. You got to just know that a couple drinks are going to affect your performance and recovery. Yeah. You got to go slower, and don't do the 9 drinks when everyone else has no drinks. Because the next day, you're probably going to have to skip it.
I just say save the drinking till the end of it.
Yeah.
If you're going specifically to improve fitness, save the drinking till that last night.
And the one thing I'd really advocate, if you haven't done something like this, I'd advocate for doing it. It's a good experience. It's a ton of fun. It's a good way to be able to get in a lot of fitness, but do so in a way that is a bit more of a change of pace. If you're just, constantly, you're following your structured routine and everything else, it's a good time to kind of suss out your teammates.
And it's an opportunity to ride with your teammates outside of a race context.
Which is really
especially
good.
if you're on a bigger team that's spread out, a regional team, that may be the only time you really get to ride with them outside of a race.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, well, thanks everybody for submitting your questions. You can do so at trainerroad.com/podcast. You can find out everything about this episode, the products we've mentioned, all that stuff. We'll have links to it in the forum. That's at forum.trainerroad.com. And just look for episode 189 and you'll find it there. If you have any questions about what we're doing here at Trainer Road, you can head over to trainerroad.com, and that's the spot to see it, any of the different things we're working on. And if you're listening to this podcast, you can share it with your friends, but you can also rate it, because remember, we need at least 100 this week. Yeah. We need to get up there. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. If you're with us on the live stream, stick with us, and we'll answer the questions you've submitted. Chat with you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Kelly says, can you explain more what you mean by kilojoule constrained? And that's it's just you may have asked this before we clarified, but it's just about being tired. So it means about when we say kilojoule constrained, that means the parts of the race, like you probably have ridden maybe 4, 5, 6 hours. By the end of the ride, you're so smashed.
Oh yeah.
That means you're kilojoule constrained.
Yeah,
Where a pro
constrained
can ride 4, 5, 6 hours anaerobic effort, feel fine, and can still do a 5-minute effort and get close to or match their best. Where me personally, I do a 6-hour ride. I try to do a 5-minute all-out effort. It's going to be much, much lower than if I was completely fresh.
Totally, yeah. Somebody is asking advice for someone who works 60 to 70 hours a week, all night shifts, and wants to be better threshold climber and good VO2 pace.
Okay, great advice. New job.
That's the same advice I give.
It would be really rough.
You can't even do all night shifts because it's going to be into the day.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and that's just a long work week.
So 2 things to point out. Better threshold climber with good VO2 pace. That's everyone's goal. So like everybody wants to be a better climber. Climbs are usually where you're made aware of the limitations of your power to weight ratio. So then we say that we're bad climbers, but really it's just because we probably could use a bit more. We need to elevate our threshold a bit more. And good VO2 pace, like all that stuff. Once again, this is a pretty general goal. So really the challenge for you isn't the specific things you're going for. It's just trying to fit in training with all of that.
Trying to maximize fitness on a really time-constrained schedule, and one that probably a sleep schedule is tough too.
I think in episode 58, we talked about training at night. There are a couple other ones. You can give it a Google search. We've talked to folks that have worked at night, and you really just have to kind of play it by ear, and you have to make sure that when you're coming into your training, that whatever session that you have following that you make sure that you don't push it too hard. And
if you haven't trained with structure, just do a low volume plan, and I'd be willing to bet you'll see some nice increases in fitness.
Yep, absolutely. Christopher asked, does Trainer Road provide estimated Vo2 max values? No, we'd rather not take a random take a guess at something. We'd rather just have a precise measurement.
Yeah, just do 5-minute maximal power. I mean, it doesn't even have to be termed a Vo2 max effort. Just what's your 5-minute power? What's your 20-minute power? If you have it, what's your 60-minute power, 40-minute power, whatever, and just see how those things compare over time.
That's why power is so effective in this case, is because it's something that you can measure.
It's just an easy get.
You see it there. There's a whole system around that in terms of how to structure your training that's very effective, and you can measure it while you're riding. It's something that's why it's pretty difficult when you get into those values and adjusting your training necessarily just by that.
And also let me add, it doesn't have to be a 5-minute effort. Excuse me. It can be if you've only got 4-minute efforts, or if you've only got 6-minute efforts, as long as it's in that ballpark. Let's just say 4 to 6 minutes, and you've got something that you can consistently rely on and is repeatable, happens enough for you to compare them, then that'll work.
Joseph asks, hey guys, will there be some focus to move all current functionality within the mobile app? So meaning like the web functionality. That is actually our focus right now. First, we're making the desktop apps very awesome, and then the mobile apps will be the next focus to make them we want to make them feature parity between the web, desktop, and app.
Same experience.
Yep, you can do pretty much anything. Although, of course, on a big screen on your desktop compared to a little small phone, there's always going to be some kind of differences, but basically do the same thing.
Galen says, love the podcast. Thanks for the content. Suggestions for slightly altering the cyclocross training plan, which is his main focus, to prepare for the Downieville all-mountain race as well. So for those that don't know, the Downieville all-mountain race, you have cross-country one day, downhill the next, and then you get overall score, and that's what the all-mountain thing is. Cool part about that is you actually have to use the same bike, and they weigh your bike every day, and if it weighs any different, then you're done. So so it's kind of an old-school approach to it. It's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Totally different demands, man. Downieville's climb is one that's very long and very consistent. It's over an hour for most folks, and that's like the main climb that you have. And then thereafter, when you're on the descent coming down, you have a ton of fluctuations. So sure, I guess that then you're talking about like the stochastic power output where you're going to be hammering, but really,
so I'm guessing
very
he's
different
training
approach.
for cyclocross, but wants to
Do Downieville as well.
I would say just use the XCO or XCM plans, but that's a tough one. Maybe just vary your weekend workouts, although I'm guessing you're probably going to be racing on some of those weekends.
My thought process is to follow the cross workouts, but then on your weekends, focus on doing a lot of sweet spot work, because you're not going to be able to be climbing at threshold or above threshold or at threshold at that race. So focus on sweet spot work and carry through. That should help.
A high level of cyclocross fitness is going to carry into it in both manners anyways, sustained climbs and pin in the downhills.
Yes.
Joseph's got another question. Will you be doing any 4-hour TR sessions in prep for Leadville? I have some coming up in the full distance plan, and I'm considering Worldwide Disaster Day on Saturday. Cool. Any tips for staying the course for those 4+ hour rides? So I'm going to break it into two questions. One is, do I need to do a 4-hour ride? And if I do, what ride should I do for Leadville and Trainer Road? And then I think disaster we can talk about separately.
Yeah, let's separate that one.
Yeah.
I don't plan. So I always do like on the weekends, once a month, maybe 2 times a month, I'll do like a 4-hour ride, maybe a 5-hour ride. And that'll be a ride that's done on the weekend, on a Saturday, and when I have plenty of time. But I've...
He's not training for Leadville.
No.
Training for nationals.
And the same thing is, I've found over time that on those really long days, my mind tells me that I need to replicate that, but the data doesn't necessarily back that up. I don't need to go out and do, those extremely long rides to be able to finish that ride.
I'd say too, if you do want to do a 4-hour ride, I'd do one of the aerobic ones.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
4 hours aerobic can be huge.
Yeah,
on a trainer?
Yeah, on a trainer.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Demanding and productive.
Yep.
Yes.
So if you can handle that, a lot of people can't handle it.
Does not have to be something like disaster.
Yeah. And you don't have to do it. So disaster, it's literally a disaster.
Isn't a training ride. It's an event.
Yeah.
It's not something you use to get stronger. It's something you train for, bring a high level of fitness to it, and then make your way through it.
No one should do it.
And then pay the price. And then pay the price. There will be consequences. All of you who are doing disaster. I applaud you on the one hand, and on the other, I say just recognize that this will be a bit of a setback after a workout like that if you got out the whole thing.
Yeah. Jay Blackberry, you have a question. This one's going to be kind of tough for us to get into because it's somewhat nebulous, but he says, how much does grit matter, meaning mental fortitude? 2 riders, the same watt kg going uphill, but one consistently comes out on top.
Huge.
It's bike racing.
Yeah.
Huge.
The grittiest riders win.
Yep. And
training every day, food choices.
Oh, yeah.
Every interval.
But when it comes down to, the top riders, when you line up and there are 100 people in your field and you look across and you see the 8 who matter, all of you are capable on that day. It's the one who wants it most, and of course has the best.
Yeah, if we all had the exact same stats, like we're literally twins.
Yeah.
It's the grittiest person mentally wins, and smartest.
And
obviously.
once you get up to that
Tactics.
high end of things, the margins between riders are so narrow.
Yep.
I've found the way to because grit is like a very it's not a specific thing, you know what I mean, and you can't there's no real roadmap to getting it. But in my mind, the way to develop grit is to put yourself in situations where you're regularly faced with hard choices, and you make the hard choice, but it ends up being the right choice. And on small scale, like you said, nutrition, getting more sleep, deciding to not watch that extra episode on Netflix and instead you go to sleep, right? It's like the small little things that gets you used to that habit. So then when you're in the situation that really matters on race day, or really matters in the grand scheme of things, probably not, but that really matters on race day, then it's easier to make those choices. Mm-hmm. But that coupled with experience, because racers that I see that have a lot of time in the saddle, once again, they've had a lot of experience making those tough choices.
It can really be about you can make it as simple as being about experience, in that you don't jump into the hardest race you're going to do on 2 weeks training. You do it after several months of training, and over the course of that several months, your body's changing, but so is your mind, and so is the leash that it keeps on your body. So these things actually slacken as you expose yourself to this type of stress again and again and again. You get better at doing it. Even if your power doesn't go up, you'll get better at doing that type of workout.
Yep. Casey says, not sure we ever got a solid answer on the Venge versus Tarmac. What do they say for average Joe? I know what you guys want is for us to say that the answer for a pro and a Joe is different, but there is no hard answer.
Yeah, there's no hard answer.
What's the
We
weight
gave-
difference? It's like a half pound, right?
No, it's like a pound or
It's
pound
not
and a
even,
half.
No, it's not. It's not even a pound.
I think
I
it's
just read this.
Yeah, I think it's even less.
Yeah,
in
it's
that
slightly
case.
under a pound.
If you get the ultralight tarmac with like the rim brake, the one that's
Then
like
it's
really
more.
light, then it's more. But
Yeah.
the point is so we try to give principles so then you can weigh those decisions. But the fact is you're gonna be fast with either one, and this transcends Venge and tarmac. This just goes to aero road bike and normal road bike. Once again, we keep saying from the outside in that as they're getting closer and closer, maybe it just becomes one bike.
They're just narrowing the gap.
But as Specialized told us, they said that but while you think that's happening, we're also making the road bike better and better and better as well. So it's really a situation where you have to weigh the importance of the critical moment of the race. Are you watt kg constrained or are you kilojoule constrained? Kilojoule constrained, go for the Venge. Watt kg constrained, go for the tarmac.
So if you look at just frame weight, because there's different things you might put on. You might change the wheels, but just frame weight and keep everything the same, including handlebars. That is 287 grams and 0.6 pounds. The difference between the two.
Not much.
So weight's not going to help you decide.
Yeah, exactly. No.
I mean, it's for I think the average Joe who is kilojoule constrained.
Yeah.
0.6
Unless you're
pounds,
doing an
that's
uphill
after
race.
I feel like it's tough to justify the case of, the tarmac being really beneficial. You have to be really splitting hairs in every other aspect of your performance to be able to get there.
Well, no, I don't know about that, but it's also, if you're not racing a bunch, the tarmac just be more enjoyable to ride than the Venge every day.
Yeah, I'm thinking a pure racing decision.
Yeah, because I mean, even if you race a few times a year, you're like, but I want to really enjoy this bike.
Yeah.
I'm going to spend
A lot of time
thousands of
training.
dollars and lots of time.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's see.
That's crazy. I kind of want to. I would talk about this. I want a tarmac too, but
It's getting harder to justify it.
I know, and I'm like, well, I'll try to because the one thing that's different is you can't switch components, so you can get that gap to be bigger,
Sure.
right? So I can get extra
Ceramic
light
chemical.
wheels, extra light crankset, everything. So there's a bigger gap.
Yeah.
Which you could get, I think, probably a 2 or 3 pound gap.
Yeah.
But then I just lost. This morning I was 185, and a few weeks ago I was 190, right? And is that?
job.
I know, but I mean the difference. I haven't been lifting weights, so it's all muscle.
Yeah.
But the difference in what was a new tarmac would cost like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, right?
Exactly.
Or I could just not lift weights for a couple weeks, and it's the same benefit.
It's the same thing.
Like it's
Yeah.
so tough. I like the Venge. I should just ride the Venge.
Two things. From
good bike.
and this is kind of along those lines. John says, or it definitely is, what do you guys think about compliance and good aluminum frames versus low to mid-level carbon frames for average Joes in regard to compliance, pivotal movement, performance on a long ride? There are very few aluminum bikes that I feel like get close to that performance point. I feel like, and so I have a CAD 12 and the thing rides incredibly well, like incredibly well. It rides better than the carbon bike that I have from 2013 in terms of compliance, genuinely does. So you do feel more like minor road vibrations. That's just the inherent nature of the material compared to carbon. But in terms of how it behaves to bumps, it actually behaves better than my carbon bike from 2013.
Do you have carbon stays?
No. It's fully aluminum frame, carbon fork. And then in this case, I have a carbon seat post, but it's not like a flexi. It doesn't have any flex stuff built into it. And then I actually have an aluminum bar and stem on that bike too.
Wow.
But it behaves better than the 2013 one that I have. The cool part about that bike is it's really cheap. Like you said, entry level. Like you can get a bike, and the geometry on that bike is incredible for road racing. It's stable, but it just, when you think it moves, it's not like a bike that is a little bit too twitchy. So I think it's a great one. I've heard that the Amonda is good from Trek as well. I haven't ridden that one. I have ridden the LA Sprint, the Specialized one. That one I don't love as much in terms of the handling compared to the Cannondale. I feel like the LA Sprint beats you up way more with that big beefy seat mass that it has. It feels much stiffer, doesn't ride quite as well. It feels like it transfers more vibration.
It's the point for that one is a stiff crit bike.
Yeah, and it's more aero. I don't know if I've seen the aero data on it, but the assumption is it's more aero because it has aero properties designed into the frame. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think it's absolutely, you have options now.
I had an aluminum bike back in the day too that had carbon fork and carbon seat and chain stays, and that thing was so compliant. Then I moved to a fairly expensive carbon bike, and it was much more rigid. Things have improved since then.
Yeah.
But you can get a more compliant bike that's aluminum, I think, especially if you have carbon seat stays. It's just the way they manufacture them.
Yeah.
Like they can make, it's up to them. So it's hard to have a hard and fast rule across all bikes.
Yeah, and on weight, I just put a new saddle on my CAD 12, and I think it weighs under 15 pounds now. It's very close
aluminum
to it.
can be light.
It's an extremely light bike.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's a good example too, though. You have lighter parts on it compared to.
Yep, I have red mechanical rim brakes. Like, everything's very much designed to be light. We're going to see if we can get it even lighter, though. So, okay, that covers it for this week. Thanks for joining us, everybody, on the live stream. We hope to see you next week. I believe, we're on a normal schedule for next week. Thereafter, with the Christmas schedule, we'll update you guys as that goes forward. But looking forward to seeing you all there. See you in the forum in the meantime, and happy training.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.